Chapter 1. Preface. In this year 1818, not even 7 centuries have yet passed since the year 1118, when the foundations were laid for the Order of the Brothers of the Knighthood of the Temple, an order which soon grew to such a size that, surpassing many thousands of knights, powerful in Europe and Asia through vast possessions, and formidable through spiritual and temporal authority, it was extinguished before even 2 centuries had elapsed by a most disastrous overthrow. In the same period, when wars were undertaken to wrest Christ's tomb from the hands of the unbelievers, there also arose in the East the infamous order of assassins, best known by the name of the Assassins, like an Islamic heresy in a sea thrown into turmoil. It raged for almost 2 centuries, and a little before the abolition of the knighthood of the temple it was cut down, hostile to caliphs and sultans alike, by ecclesiastical and secular authority joined together. In the history of this most shameful alliance, which has appeared together with this dissertation in the German language from Kata's press, we have already touched on several matters concerning the civil connection between the assassins and the Templars, matters which are here brought out from the Temple's secret teaching into a new light. Each order, cloaking the aims of ambition in the garb of piety, either did nothing for piety or else subjected it to earthly desire, and so long as that utterly wicked discipline lay hidden in secret, it advanced into an immense growth and rose to the greatest power, until, when the mystery of its wickedness was made public, sought with anathema and the sword by Pope and King, it atoned for its hidden doctrines with blood and extinguished the conflagration by its own ruin. The history, then, of the Brothers of the Knighthood of the Temple, and of its secret institutions, belongs all the more to the East, because from there this order drew its origin, because arising from Syria, a common seedbed of the dominant religions, and likewise a bosom of the most impious sects, it derived the doctrines of the most ancient Eastern philosophy from the Temple of Jerusalem. It put these doctrines forward, and 7 centuries after the finding of the cross by Helena and its exaltation by Constantine, it assigned to the cross, drawing on religious traditions of Phoenicia and Egypt, a certain older and secret meaning, mingling what is most holy with what is most profane, and corrupting the most recent Christian teaching with the most ancient symbols of Eastern philosophy. Many heresies of that same age, all of which sprang from the tree of Gnosis, have had the true and full exposition of their doctrines sought from Eastern sources by Orientalist scholars. Thus we read the commentaries of the Parsis brought to light by Anquetil and illustrated by Klucker, the Gnostic doctrine of the Nazareans, most recently set forth by Norberg. The system of the Druses and the Mutavillis, sketched by Adler, awaits a fuller elucidation from the illustrious Sylvestre de Sacy. The heresies of the Manichaeans and the Ophians, treated by the most renowned historians of heresy, Guizobert and Mosheim, would certainly shine out still more if writers had devoted greater effort to Oriental philology. Finally, the windings of Gnosis are completely unraveled from the Kabbalah by Horn. Following these traces, we have made public, as matters of common right, the history of the assassins and the secret doctrines of the Templars, doctrines which, with the destruction of the order, like a phoenix from the flame, rose again at least as symbols, more surely than sure, in the Masonic order. Clearly we know that we are treading on dangerous ground, with hidden fires beneath treacherous ash, and we feel that we are handling a work full of perilous risk if we attempt to reveal to readers the head of Baphomet which lay hidden, shrouded for 7 centuries. Chapter 2. The mystery of Baphomet revealed. The brothers of the military order of the Temple, who, being Gnostics and Ophites, are convicted of apostasy, idolatrous worship, and impurity by their own monuments. What charge could more expose us to hatred and danger, especially in our own day, when the most learned and eloquent men have undertaken the defense of this order, once we have fully seen the matter? Nor for that reason should we hold back our hand from our purpose, namely, to lay open the wicked mystery of the Templars' secret doctrine, and to show that, each head of accusation being proved, they were not unjustly condemned as men bound together by a pact of crime and a nefarious association. Yet we shall not deny that many among them lived and died as simple men, unskilled in wickedness and ignorant of impious mysteries, faithful observers of the statutes made under public law, and stout, sincere defenders of the Christian faith, since in all societies of this kind, which history teaches have arisen as enemies to the state and to religion, it is clear that many were not deceivers but deceived, not authors but instruments of crimes, not accomplices but unaware. But if the secret discipline of some society directly opposes the doctrine it professes publicly, undermines the foundations of religion and morals, profanes what is most holy, defiles what is most pure, must it not be judged that the very order itself was an enemy to the commonwealth and to the human race in general, and that its condemnation, and if not the punishment of each individual, at least the abolition of the whole order is to be held just and fair, that such was the doctrine of the Templars can be strongly persuaded from the remnants of their monuments still surviving, though hitherto held of no authority, from idols, from idol, sculptures and coins, from seals, stones, and bronze, in short from everything, persuasive not to the followers of any party, but only to those curious about historical truth. After reading the mass of pamphlets for the prosecution and the defense which first appeared in public in our own day, and after gathering the historical learning that has been brought to bear on the character of these writers, I think I have discovered for the reader nothing except what, on either side, has been put forward in hatred or in favor of this most famous case. I shall not argue with words where stones lie hidden, nor does it help to summon historians where monuments stand as witnesses, unless these new and previously unknown monuments should come to light for us, and unless from those documents which up to now have been exposed to the public eye, it should be necessary to decide the guilt or innocence of the Templars. Then of all the writers on this matter we shall agree most of all with the last of them, who offering no support for the accusations brought against them, simply argues from the nature of things, of men, and of the times, and, speaking skeptically about the Templars' guilt and innocence, weakens the former and confirms the latter. And indeed, if we should choose to give no weight to the accusations heaped up against the Templars by historians, if from the alleged treason against Louis the Saint and the King of Jerusalem, from the handing over of the castle of Kerak and of Acre, from a treaty struck with the assassins, from connivance with the Sultan of Egypt, we should wish to infer nothing against them, if we should not care to trust the very frequent confessions about the worship of an idol, about spitting on and trampling the cross, and about the foulest crime committed or permitted. What prevents us from holding all these things, not only as plausible, but even as true, when we consider the nature of men and of those times, and find similar teaching and similar morals in so many other sects of the Middle Ages? What wonder that, if we find the same doctrines of impiety and the same crimes in various Eastern sects, and especially among the notorious Manichaeans, Albigensians, Mazdakites, and assassins, what wonder if the contagion of this doctrine and wickedness also crept into a society of Christian soldiers, whose founders for 10 years could not associate even a single novice with themselves until, fleeing to the bosom of the church, they concealed their secret teaching, in all likelihood already existing then, under the institution of St. Bernard? What wonder that these knights allied with the assassins, imbued with their abominable doctrine and living in Syria infected by the errors of Syrian sects, while fighting in the East also allowed themselves a vice common to all the Eastern fortresses? What wonder, finally, that this order, as an example of so many other famous societies, under the appearance of religion, by the power of rule had imbibed, and in his secret commentaries had held that religion devoted only to nature, and everything else that did not serve domination or pleasure were mere trifles and laughable opinions. All these things, since Gruvius could show that they might arise from the nature of things and of men, and could, so to speak, prove the guilt of the Templars by philosophical reasoning a priori, we shall demonstrate the same a posteriori by unanswerable arguments drawn from the facts themselves and set before the faithful eyes of readers as documentary evidence. First, then we shall treat of the idols commonly called Baphomet, then of the mystical bowls or chalices, of the sculptures and coins of the Templars, from which it will be clear that their secret doctrine was the same as that of the Gnostics, and indeed of the Ophians. Then, to avoid the fault of obscurity, we shall inquire a little more deeply and set forth the doctrine of the Ophians and its connection with the most ancient commentaries of Greek, Syrian, and Egyptian philosophy. And we shall allow ourselves an excursion into the inner sanctuaries of the Freemasons. By illustrating the symbolism of the Templars, we shall show the remarkable agreement of their symbols with Masonic symbols and their identity, finally. When the whole system of this most ancient doctrine has been made clear, and when the articles of accusation against the Templars have been brought forward from the course of the trial, we shall vindicate the complete truth of those charges and the justice of the condemnation from every suspicion. And if the Supreme Pontiff in the Bull of Abolition condemned them not as convicted, but suppressed the order by the fullness of ecclesiastical power, this seems to fight not in their favor but rather against them, since it is right to judge that the highest pontiff preferred to cover rather than to reveal the crimes and disgrace of an order that for so many years had been increased by the Church with such honors and privileges. For this reason, the bundles of the acts of the trial and the original documents still lie sealed in Rome to this day. And when at last they are brought to light, since they will have become matters of public law, we do not doubt that they will wonderfully agree with the monuments we have discovered and revealed. Meanwhile, these monuments, taken from stone and bronze, will be sufficient to prove to all who, untainted by prejudice, examine the plain truth of history, the secret discipline and pernicious doctrine of the brothers of the militia of the temple. We revere the noble candor of other defenders who, like the most illustrious Renoir and the most learned Munter, an ornament of the Danish church and a great pillar of the Republic of Letters, refuse to suspect in others any depravity or wickedness, being themselves pure and upright, but nevertheless their apologetic arguments are overwhelmed by the number and authority of our monument. Chapter 3, on the idols called Baphomet. No fewer than 24 of these idols have come to my notice. Some of them have been published up to now, though not understood. Others still lie hidden in collections of antiquities, not yet made public property. Of these, one was first engraved on copper in the Gentleman's Magazine in the year 1755. 3 others were drawn in the Cabinet of Curiosities, Curiositaten Volten, Book 6, Part 6. 2 are found here in Vienna in the Schoenfeld collection. The remaining 19 are kept in the Imperial Royal Collection of Antiquities. All these idols, as can be seen from the drawings, are set before the eyes and from comparison with 4 already engraved elsewhere, though they are not all in the same shape. And though they differ in size and bear inscriptions in different languages, Arabic, Greek, and Latin, nevertheless display the same character and must be referred to one and the same form of worship. These stones, even by their appearance alone, as will be clear from what follows, show evidence of the profane cult to which they belonged. Yet since the inscriptions shed the greatest light, we must first call them to examination, and only after they have been made clear shall we proceed to a further explanation of the signs and to the series of proofs that must be drawn from them. The inscriptions, carved in 3 different languages, Arabic, Greek, and Latin, also define, as it were, a threefold kind of meaning. Most of the Greek inscriptions on the small idols indicate nothing else than the names of the owners who kept them in their little boxes. 2 others, one Greek, the other Latin, contain a kind of commentary devised by the owners, already noted earlier. The Arabic inscriptions, finally, everywhere the same, though with words and letters transposed, disclose the proper secret meaning of the doctrine and the whole mystery of this hidden discipline. The Arabic letters, not formed with exactness, reveal not only the unskilled hand of the engraver, but are also sometimes deliberately cut short and rearranged, so that even to those who can read Arabic, the secret sense of the inscription might be concealed by the ambiguity of the writing. Thus it happened that Cyclerus, in the preface to the Cabinet of Curiosities mentioned above, to Book 6, Part 6, at first wrongly thought these inscriptions were Persian rather than Arabic, an error which I corrected in the following gathering, and not without reason. By engraving in another place the hermeneutic word Gongahiahia, since I took these signs for alchemical symbols, and because the principal word mete, that is mete, offered no genuine Arabic meaning, I supposed it had been put in place of that is water Greek inscriptions, on small idols from the Royal Caesarian collection of antiquities. 1K Salkoi 2, Glaupeo 3, Glau 4, Lichotros 5, Lido 6, Libna Pippo. See the idol 14 on plate of all. The following Greek and Latin names of owners are either invented or genuine, as Petrus Toletinus Ludovicus, and so on show. 2. Telitnu pa Petrus, that is Peter, son of Toletinus, pause for pays. 8. On an idol, plate 2 fig. 13. Gold of the waters, that is, the gold of the water is what is meant here by gold-bearing water, or by this liquid gold, will more probably be understood below, where there will be a place to discuss it. On 2 idols from the Schoenfeld collection, 9, Saltran, 10, Ietham, which read from right to left is mighty. Since these bronze idols are not engraved, and since examples of the same kind are already known from curiosity, they have been omitted here so that the jumble of images might not be increased. Latin inscriptions on a certain idol from the Royal Caesarian collection. See plate 2 fig. 10. 11. Ludovicus. That is Ludovicus, it is uncertain what the surname is since many letters are worn away. In this inscription, Latin letters are mixed with Greek, either through the sculptor's inexperience or deliberately, to confuse the minds of unlearned readers. This becomes especially clear in the following inscription, in which, besides the confused shapes of Greek and Latin letters, 2 very secret words are indicated only by their initial letters. Thus, of the first mate, only the first 2 letters are present, while the next 2 are supplied by asterisks. But the other word, Gnosticus, is marked by the letters no, and the rest, in place of letters, is completed by the best-known symbol of the Gnostics, namely a serpent. 12. On an idol from the Royal Caesarian collection, see plate I fig. 11. On the idol, Tiorlam nini tu homo es remenia sicia, that is, remember, diemone protoro omnen, that is, all no Gnostic Arabic inscriptions. When what had to be said about the Western inscriptions, that is, the Greek and Latin, was finished, we now pass to the Eastern, and indeed the Arabic inscriptions. From 12 monuments of the same kind, namely idols and bowls, it has fallen to us to gather an equal number. The Arabic language was not unknown in the time when the armies of the European Crusade were pressing into Syria, yet its use was not so common that the knights of that age, uncultivated men, scarcely able to read and write even their native tongue, could be judged to be learned in reading and writing Arabic. The hidden meaning of these inscriptions, which we have seen were all composed according to one and the same pattern, plainly did not escape several owners of the idols, but that very many were altogether unable to read, and unskilled in reading Arabic, is far from unlikely. This knowledge of Eastern languages, like every other branch of learning, then flourished only among the clergy, and especially those attached to the shrine at Jerusalem. From them, or from one of the 9 founders of the Brotherhood of the Knights Templar, one man obtained from an Ophite writer this secret teaching, and decided that it should be inscribed on all the idols of Metis. If these statements seem rash, we shall later show by irresistible arguments that they do not depart from the truth, and it was necessary to say this much beforehand, so that a reader who is not ignorant of Arabic, yet still unaware of the arguments that follow, may not be surprised at the scribal errors, the repetitions, and the frequent transpositions in these inscriptions, but may understand that they arose either from the cleverness of the owners, who by shifting words and letters, hope to conceal the secret meaning more effectively from profane readers, or from the incompetence of the engravers. In the same way, the ancients already used signs when writing secret letters, and everything that is reported about Caesar's letters to Oppius and Balbus is to be observed here. Single letters without the joining of syllables, which you might think were set down at random, for no words can be made from those letters. But there was a clandestine agreement between them by changing the position of the letters, that the inscription would indeed have a different place and name, yet in reading, each letter would be restored to its own place and power. From Aulus Gellius, Book 17, Chapter 9, we certainly sweated a great deal in untying the knots of these inscriptions. Since, besides the misshapen letters and the transposition of words, the student of Eastern philology is especially put off by the appearance of the name Meta, written in Arabic script, which is not Arabic, but borrowed from another language. Therefore, I myself, when I first thought these were chemical inscriptions, judged that this Meta, since it offered no sense at all in Arabic, ought to be read as Meti, that is, water of the desert, until this came back to me. O Almighty Meta, in the formula found in all the inscriptions, this word, not Arabic but taken from Greek, could mean nothing other than emteen, that is, mind, or intelligence, as was beyond doubt an example for us. Once the meaning of this principal word had been discovered, it was necessary, from our 12 inscriptions, to find one or another in which the correct order of the words was shown without transposition of letters. And this happened for us most fortunately through an inscription very well preserved on a marble bowl, a Caesarean royal ciborium carved, which by no means gives a full and natural sense when the text is supplied or altered. For I came to this from those inscriptions that have been published in the little book of curiosities, D6. Saint, I had already seen clearly that the one on the bearded mammary idol, consisting of only 2 words, offers an excellent start point and aid for bringing out others. Inscription number 13, see plate 1, fig 5. But since these 2 words lack the usual distinguishing marks, although no doubt is raised about the second, whether it was or were, there remains uncertainty about the first. Whether it should be read 7 or 9, since there are 9 founders of the Order of the Templars, and therefore that number suits better for an inscription on temple idols. I nevertheless think it should be read 7. And I will gladly leave the reasons for this reading to be judged by readers in the interpretation of the second inscription. Inscription number 14, on a very large marble bowl. See plate 2, fig. Warning. That Mede, figured with a hand, holds an unrolled membrane on which these words are plainly to be read. Exalted or almighty meat budding. Our stock, I and 7 were. You are one of those who deny the return of the first man comes to pass. We shall call each word of this inscription to a hermeneutic examination. Tiala, word for word exalted, is the name of God Almighty among the Arabs. And Allah Tila, God exalted, to mean God Almighty, escapes no one who has been touched even lightly by the Arabic tongue. 4 Orphic Metas, but only a kin in name, is known among other Gnostic sects under the name of Sophia, Prunikos, Barbello, or even Achamat. From this last Syriac name, our meat seems to have been derived, whether from Mavis or Metis. What sort of person she was we shall discuss more fully below. For now, the occasion of her name is enough. Nash, that is, sprouting, growing. Coming to maturity for Nashi, as it is said, and Nas, that is, forgetting for Nasi, as in that well-known Arabic proverb. Nas, the first man, Nias, the first forgetter, namely Adam, because he was the first to forget the Lord's command. Nazelna, that is, our stock. Ina fe sabea kani, that is, I and 7 were, since here the Mithra, with horn, head, beard, and a woman's pedenda displayed. See plate 2, fig sheet 1. Holding an unrolled scroll is thought to speak these words. One must not doubt that he is speaking of himself, and of the 7 archons, of whom the first was Aldebaoth, and the other 6 were begotten from him. But if anyone, in place of 7, should read 9 and should wish to refer this number to the first 9 Knights Templar, I too would oppose that opinion, and so would the 9, for the founder of the order, Hugh de Payens, is already included among the number of the first 9 knights, and on that way of reading they would, contrary to the truth of history, have been 10 and not 9. You deny me, you are a denier, the added word, for sugar is either superfluous or a mark of unity. One of the deniers denied from the root sugar, but for Muslim he did not have it. See Golium, this word, in this inscription. Must undoubtedly be read thus. In all other cases it is harder to make out, because of the unfamiliar form of the letter Kaf, whether from the sculptor's ignorance or on purpose, so that the sense of apostasy might be more hidden from profane eyes. Return. See Golium and Meninsky. In common speech, both in Egypt and in Syria, they use this as a first insult, and no one who has visited those regions and heard the common people's sayings can deny it. Thus, they constantly have in their foulest mouths that common reproach, area fetish, And in Syria, the name John the Baptist is especially liable to such jests, because in French, Jean Baptiste, pronounced, sounds almost like Jean-Baptiste. Tassir, this word, which in these inscriptions is so often carved distinctly, both with and without diacritical marks, I think has been mistakenly written as Tassir, with sad in place of sin. No one will be surprised at this scribal error who knows the crude character of this script. And besides, he will know that other Syrian sects, such as the Druze, have deliberately written certain words incorrectly beyond the usual. Whoever, instead of Tassir, prefers to read perhaps Jasir, that is, he made easy, will find the same meaning, namely, he returned from apostasy easily. In the sense of first, when we have read this inscription, where everything follows clearly and in the natural order of the words, we shall explain those things that have already been published in the Little Book of Curiosities, Part 2, Book 6, Fascicle. Inscription number 15. In the Little Book of Curiosities, Tekka 6 AD, on the front and on the back, several errors in transpositions of words, already evident from the previous inscription, and also the peculiar letter Ydain, which occurs in none of the others, should be noted. It begins with the word mate with the first syllable me repeated, then follows the word, but it is written in such a form that, unless it has been written elsewhere just as clearly many times, it can hardly be recognized here with certainty. Next comes the word, meaning you have renounced, but with the letters transposed into a leaf. Then follows can, and afterward the second, unusual letter dam. The word which elsewhere is preceded by metam is here written beneath it, and the following words are read distinctly. Exalted is the Almighty Meda. You too are among those who renounce. And there were 7, our offspring, the phrase usefulness in or it benefits, which in what follows we shall indicate more briefly by APP again. It begins with the word, which, as Golius notes, means it appears so that it could be interpreted as usefulness appears. But more likely this is nothing other than with the first letter transposed or omitted. What the ean repeated here again is meant to convey is harder to assert, since it occurs nowhere else. But if we judge from the known shorthand method of Arabic writing, such a single letter is put either as an initial or as a final for an entire word. Thus the letter kaf, as the initial of the word chemicane, signifies the initial of the word, the talismanic art, and the yayin itself, occurring very frequently in all manuscripts, is placed for, that is, a hemistich. Since it immediately precedes the word khan, it seems to be placed for sabi, that is, 7, in order to repeat this principal formula. And there were 7, which is shown as the only separate inscription on the bearded. Mammiform idol, see plate 155, inscription Nova 16, from the booklet Curiosities, 2/6 BC on the front. On the back, Almighty meaty sprouting, correct up to this point. So that, together with what follows, the already known formula may be brought out. And there were 7, our offspring, the letter which seems to follow 7 is ya. If the final none is rejected, it yields the sense, O you, from among those who renounce. Again, in continuation of the inscription placed on the front, it reads, that is, first. Usefulness sprang up through the sprouting water of knowledge. From the context, it is clear that the sprouting water is none other than evangelical seed. And the knowledge which here is expressed not by the usual word ilm, but by, that is art or skill, Siemeninsky, is none other than ophitic gnosis, as becomes clearer below. Inscription number 17, taken from the Gentleman's Magazine, although it is engraved in brass. In part, the words on the male figure are, that is, usefulness. I am our offspring. You are denied usefulness. And from the part showing the figure of a woman and 7, the Almighty, the knowledge of return first. These are easy to read. When they are properly arranged and restored, they yield the same meaning that the inscriptions above provided. Inscription number 18, plate worn fig 13. On the back of the idol, holding a child, the words are engraved very distinctly, but they have gradually been shifted out of place, and 7 was there. You are one who denies. The Almighty Medas, bringing forth the helper, is favorable to our stock. First, there are 2 principal transpositions. You are one who denies is read as you are one who denies, Instead of, if you are one who denies, then stock, that is our stock, which ought to follow after and 7 has been thrown after the epithets of metas. Among these, we find something new here, making one prostrate. From the root, meaning to order the camel to kneel, but here making one prostrate has a very shameful sense, as becomes clearer from the broader use of the word substituted for it in the following inscriptions. For there one reads, very prone to Venus, from the root whose derivative and frequentative nick, whence perhaps the German nickel, is well known to all returning from Egypt, where dancing girls, perhaps the word halima, borrowed from Greek, are accustomed to tease travelers with that oft-repeated refrain, ma fish fulus, ma fish nick, and the like. Inscription number 19, Plate 1, Fig. 7. On the arms of the idol, fashioned as male and female, the letters are distinct but transposed. On the right arm, our stock, and 7 was where was is missing at the end and has been placed before and 7 on the left arm. The Almighty Metis bringing forth her convia favorable to fertility and pleasure, or the helper. Here the 2 syllables of the word meet are separated by an inserted word, and the letters are set in reversed order. Already in the earlier inscription, the explained passage holds the place of making one prostrate. Inscription number 20 on the idol, plate 4.2. On the back of the idol bending its knees, let metis convia be exalted. I and our stock were 7, if you are among those who deny. Inscription number 21, plate 2, fig 11. On the bearded mammiferous idol, the almighty Metis, the almighty convia, you are denying. Inscription 22 on the base of a small 2-headed idol, plate 2, fig 9 is written, our stock you denying. And 7. On the opposite side of this base, Latin and Arabic characters are mixed in such a way to indicate gnosis, a Latin G to the initial of nocios, and an Arabic J, the same in shape, and the same as in the inscription published in the little book of curiosities, together with the letter Ni, that is, Nen, gnosis, are combined with one another. Now that Fen in Arabic signifies science is plainly shown from the well-known title of Haji Alpha's Encyclopedia, and it will soon occur again below. The English word fun, to which the Arabic fen is most closely akin. Inscription 23 on the inner side of the lid of the square bowl, which you see, plate 2, fig 5, and the bowl itself there, fig 15, is written, you are denying rejoice. I advise then, meta here, the particle phi, that is and o or rejoice, is repeated. The word fesh is written with the letters transposed, and the word mete lacking half its part is missing its first syllable. Inscription number 24. On the outer rim of the 8-sided bowl, shown in plate 2, fig 13, there is an inscription. This inscription contains nothing else except words already known from the earlier ones, but so broken up and scattered that, even if they were already familiar, they cannot be put together from these disjointed elements. Moreover, the corrupted lettering makes the reading more difficult. At the bottom one reads, Meet Consvivia. PP and 7, you are denying when these inscriptions have been explained. Their meaning, tending to the foulest pleasure, speaks for itself, and the other, more obscure part of the Ophian doctrine, through the explanation I shall give of it below, will become clearer once we bring forward passages from the proceedings of the Templars concerning the idols called Baphomet, whose description agrees very well with ours. In point 320 of the articles at Dupuy, likewise, it is said that they had idols for each province, namely heads, some of which had 3 faces, others 1, and some had a human skull. Some of our idols have 2 faces, others 1, and in the bowl on whose cover such an idol is depicted, you see a skull placed beneath its feet, plate 2, fig 5. Likewise, in articles 52 and 53, also that which makes trees flower, and that which makes the earth sprout. We have seen our matin, that is, the germinant or sour, invoked everywhere, even in the African language. Page 519, it is said a bronze head with 2 faces. There are 7 of these idols with 2 faces, 3, namely, depicted in the little book of curiosities, and 3 of our 2-headed idols placed on 2 monuments. The idol, plate 1, figure 2, has 1 head but 2 faces on the front. Another, as was said above, has only a single head, from the confession of the Templar Gosseran de Montparnasse, that their superior showed him a bearded idol made in the form of Baphomet. Likewise, it is of a terrible figure, which seems like a devil called in French Moffet likewise. And as soon as those chords are touched and set in motion, an idol is produced, which is in the form of a man's head with a great beard. These things correspond very well to our idols, everything wrinkled and with a grim look. So that, as Nikolai already observed, page 292, it seems to have arisen more from the sculptor's difficulty than from any established design. Made in the form of a human being, most are bearded. Yet, since they present a double nature of male and female, and some at first glance appear female, that deposition preserved in Moldenhauer, page 397, fits very well, that this idol was a woman, and therefore he thought it to be one of the 11,000 virgins. Testimony 72 to Article 46. In the Paris General Chapter 1, often saw a silver head to which the assembled superiors paid their reverence. At that time, I heard and believed that the head was one of the 11 virgins, page 397. Testimony 200. He showed me a head on the altar with a long gray beard, page 590. Testimony 201. Then he drew from his bosom a figure of gold or brass, which, as it seemed to him, had a female form. He showed it to him and said, "Others believe in it," page 16. Testimony 209. A fine head of gilded silver and of female form, chapter 58. Displayed in the chapters of secret worship were destroyed, and since they are marked with the names of their owners, and since that of him, this testimony is confirmed by a witness who, in Dupuis p. 526, said, that certain Templars carried such idols in their chests, concerning the adoration, denial, and impious worship, on account of which the Templars were accused in connection with this idol, the epithets meet, the all-powerful, subactrix, and the words about denial and renunciation are spoken plainly enough, having brought these matters forward into the light. And since this met, both in figure and in name, is now known to us from stones and inscriptions, we shall first ask what this two-formed monster was. Then we shall seek the explanation of the common name, Baphomet. Is not the same as the Greek metis. Yet there remains no doubt that our Gnostic meti was taken from the Homeric, or rather the Orphic meti. Our meti is none other than the Sophia of the Ophians, who is also called Achamoth, Prunikos, and Barpolo. And although this name, which appears in all our inscriptions, is not found in the writings of the Fathers among those same writers' traces of this name, carried over from Greek mythology into the commentaries of the Gnostics and twisted to a different meaning, are treated by Epiphanius as certain, when he affirms that the Ophians transferred the Greek myths, and especially Metis, into another sense, as may be seen in that same Epiphanius, where it is also assigned as a reason why the Ophians held dogs in the highest veneration. Eusebius likewise, attributing to Metis the same functions of divine wisdom and providence that the Gnostics assigned to Sophia, shows the manner in which the Metis of the Greeks was transformed into the Meta of the Gnostics, just as the name. So too the figure displaying both sexes was borrowed from ancient fables, as we learn from Macrobius, who reports that Venus was represented at once in male and female form. So in this idol we discern Metis and Aphrodite combined, and a symbol in which prudence and pleasure are joined. Finally, even the firstborn god of the Orphics, male and female, famed under various names among which was Metis, seems akin to our Mede. From this god, the all-generating one of the Orphics, and from the goddess of Hierapolis, the Meti of the Ophians, seems to have been formed. For the goddess of Hierapolis, as Plutarch testifies, was nature, who supplied seeds for all things from moisture, something that fits very well with the epithet germinate. Some call her Aphrodite, others Hera. Others think she is the cause in nature that provides beginnings and seeds for all things from moisture, and they regard her as the origin of all things, and show her to be the beginning of all good things for human beings. Plutarch, Crassus, Cit. Therefore she was the guide of generation and of knowledge, our Metier the counselor, or Ericapia. Sophia too, The female daughter of the eternal father of the Gnostics was a spirit of a double kind, both male and female, as is clear from all the fathers who wrote about Gnostic doctrine. This Sophia is sometimes confused with her daughter Achamoth, and sometimes distinguished from her, but whether she is the same as her mother or separate. Everything that is said about Achamoth fits our Mede extremely well, so that one may assert that Mede was one being under many names, by which this male-female aeon is called among the various sects of the Gnostics. The name Mede, even if it is not found in books, nevertheless occurs everywhere in these our idols, and since everything said of Sophia, called at one time Prunikos, at another Barbelo, at another Achamoth, at another Helen, at another Topina, at another Jewel, at another Enthymzus, agrees perfectly with our idols. Nothing is to be assumed about their true meaning beyond this. It remains for us to inquire into the compound name, Baphomet. The true sense of this word, Greek daiged, that is, the dying or baptism of Mede. Nicholas clearly brings out inquiry into the accusations against the Order of the Templars, Part 1p7. That very shrewd man rightly perceived that the secret doctrine of the Templars was Gnostic, and that the meaning of Baphomet ought to be referred to the commentaries of the Gnostics. Only in this he went astray, that he thought Mede was synonymous with Gnosis, and that through the idols the Father, creator of the world, was represented, whereas Mede does not mean the law of Gnosis, but the very lawgiver female-male, otherwise called Achamoth, signifying the daughter of Jaldaeoth, who was also called Propator, but not Father. Nicholas, therefore, in our judgment, touches the truth in taking the word Dakaliat, or Dirai, here to mean nothing other than the mystical dying, or Gnostic baptism, something that can soon be proved from passages of the Fathers and from mystical bowls, 3 of which are kept in the Caesarea royal treasury, and which serve this Ophite baptism. First, we have already seen the Gnostic passage of Hermes Trismegistus cited by Nicholas, where God sends a messenger with a bowl filled with mind, where perfected souls, striving toward true gnosis, are commanded to immerse themselves. Other authorities of the Fathers support this passage as well, in which the Gnostics' mystical baptism is discussed, and various terms, twisted from Hebrew or other languages, are brought forward, one of which is Datalajaha. No wonder, then, that baptism was changed into Baphen and Meti into Meten. By this Gnostic baptism was meant not a washing of redemption by water, but a spiritual purification by fire, as is understood from Theo, as is clear from the passages taken from Justin in so many words, and the same is evident from Justin and Irenaeus. For this spiritual baptism and fiery anointing, there were set at the feet of our carved idols mixing bowls filled with fire, so that it might be plainly seen how that mystical rite was performed. A twofold representation of the same thing is set before our eyes. First, that of an infant, who represents the Gnostic neophyte, placed by Mitnet at the feet of this bowl. See Plate 1, Fig. 14. Second, that of a boy standing over a bowl of this kind, blazing and surrounded by a whirling cloud of flame and smoke. See Plate 3, Fig 3. All these matters we shall set forth more clearly in the following chapter, which deals with the bowls. Chapter 4. On the mixing bowls in the Caesarea Regio collection, there are 3 very precious mixing bowls, 1 made of marble, 2 made of steatite. All 3 are distinguished by Arabic inscriptions already explained above, and for that reason belong to the same cult and to the idols already mentioned. Even if one were to make nothing of the inscriptions, there can be no doubt about the matter from the very shape of these bowls. See Plate 1, Figs 9, 14, 15, and from their repeated appearance at the feet of our 3 idols. That bowls or cups were used in mysteries is well known from every kind of antiquity, but the original meaning of these particular bowls we shall explain more fully here. On the large bowl, on whose upper part Ophitic rites are carved, there stands a double figure of a bowl, one which modesty forbids me to describe here in plain terms. Yet, so that we may satisfy the necessity of this commentary, it must be said that the 2 bowls represent both sexes, the union of the male and the birth of the female. Therefore, this bowl signifies nothing other than the female sex as a symbol of generation. And this too is seen at the feet of 3 of the idols, with this difference, however, that in the same place a pall of fire burns, representing the generative power. Thus, on one idol, see Plate 1, Fig 9, as is noted in the little book of curiosities, it is marked on the female side at its feet. But on another idol, see Plate 1, Fig 15, such a double bowl is set with its base turned opposite, one of which is filled with fire. That is with the symbol of generative force, while the other shows an infant coming forth from the womb. The neck of the bowl is sometimes shorter, sometimes longer. Shorter in the marble bowl and in one of the same form, Plate 2, Fig 14. Longer in the vessel shaped like what is commonly called a carafe, which appears on the square base of the 2-headed idol, Plate 2, Fig 9, and in the procession of baptismal ceremonies of spiritual or fiery baptism. In a bowl, see Plate 2, Fig 2, is held in the hand by one of the attendants, who stands nearest the king. The letter G, which on the base of the 2-handled vessel is inscribed together with the Arabic word nos, as knowledge, is an excellent indication that this vessel is the first symbol of Genesis in the Ophite Gnostic system. From what has been said above, it does not seem absurd to us to affirm that this was likewise the meaning of all the bowls in ancient mythology. We shall bring forward here as testimony no fewer than 12 bowls celebrated phonetically. Of these, 6 are held in the hands of the greatest gods, while the other 6 are assigned to genii of a lower order. Everywhere we clearly perceive the symbol of Genesis expressed. The bowls of the gods are those of Osiris, Liber, Hercules, Mithras, to which we add the bowl of Diskemskid and Jupiter. The other 6 bowls are the double cup of souls, the double cup of the Demiurge in Plato, the cup of Anubis, and the cup of mind in Hermes Trismegistus. Who does not know that Osiris, like Liber Heracles, and Mithras was nothing other than the sun, who, according to Macrobius, Saturnalia, Book 1, was called agentos, meaning that which is always arising and which itself generates all things by sowing, fostering, producing, nourishing, and increasing. The same author in the Dream of Scipio, Book 1, Chapter 20, calls him the mind and ordering principle of the world. We shall soon find the bowl of mind which founded the world, ordering Greek Crassus, is nothing other than mixture, on which all Genesis depends and from which the very name of the bowl, krater, is derived. Therefore, in Plato, in the Philebus, Hephaestus and Dionysus, fire and wine, are called gods of mixture. That the bowl of Diskemskid was nothing other than the sun is clear to Eastern philologists, and from its division it is evident, and from Justin Martyr's apology for the Christians we learn, that in the Mithraic mysteries, a cup was used to signify the mystery of the Eucharist. If these cups are to be referred to the generative power of the sun, which sows and produces all things, the other 6 symbols of a higher Genesis are understood to be those of the creation of the world and the generation of souls. The first cup, the greater zogonon, life-producing, is also called the lesser, but Genesis through mixture was expressed in such a way that Crassus and the mixing bowl was regarded as male and female. Proclus on the Timaeus. The double bowl likewise pertained to souls, one of forgetfulness for Genesis, the other leading to wisdom and understanding. We see the bowl of Anubis depicted on mummies, and we have already found above, in Hermes Trismegistus, the bowl of mind. At last, the cup of Jupiter given to Alcmene as the price of pleasure was called by its proper name, the Carchesium. Therefore, when we trace in the most ancient mythology the original meaning of the mixing bowl, cup, and find that it was everywhere the same, we need not be surprised that, among all the sacred vessels of the mysteries of the ancients, the mixing bowl and the cup held the first place as the symbol of the Gnostics' mystical supper and of the secret doctrine of the Templars. Although it is not clear from the writings that it was put to this use from the form of the monuments in which these flaming bowls are seen, see Plate 1, Figs 9, 14, 15, and from the very construction of one of these 3 bowls. It must be affirmed that in place of hearths, they were used to feed a fire kindled from tinder, and for burning incense, so that the neophytes, standing upon this bowl and breathing in the fragrant incense, were prepared for that spiritual union which among the Gnostic Ophites took the place of baptism, the Eucharist, and all the sacraments. This opinion is confirmed by the fire which we everywhere see blazing from these bowls, set at the feet of idols. See Plate 1, Figs. 9:15. Then the neophyte, in the likeness of an infant, is placed upon the bowl by a parent in this manner. Plate 1, Fig J. 14. And finally, again, an infant likewise stands upon the bowl and is surrounded by a whirl of smoke from incense. See Plate 2, Fig 3. Since this representation is also depicted on the bowl itself. Plate 2, Fig. 15. It fully shows its use. This sacrament of fire is better still, and with all the ceremonies belonging to the same rite, carved on the second bowl. Plate 2, Fig. 2. Where the fire is not from a hearth, but from a blazing pyre, and the procession of attendants and companions declares a greater festival of this kind, whether you prefer to call it baptism or spiritual union. For there, I ask you, who is it that represents either the font of baptism or the marriage bed? Flute players and lyre players press close to the ceremonies, then attendants clothed with a robe and carrying a napkin, one of whom bears that mystical vessel made in the form of a shallow bowl, a carafe, which is also drawn in Plate 2, Figure 9. Another carries an axe, which is also depicted on that base. See Plate 2, Fig 9. And a third, finally, carries the cimbalum, which the idol, see Plate 1, Fig 16, holds behind its back. These are the ceremonies of that mystical sacrament, and of the infamous orgies with which the Gnostics are accused by the Fathers. Orgies which, when the lamps were removed, they soon celebrated in promiscuous shame now, under the name of a supper, now under the name of spiritual union. These orgies are plainly expressed in all three of our bowls, with the implements applied there, so that it is clear to the observer what these orgies are, and to what sect of the Gnostics this bowl belongs to the same inscriptions and the same marked idols. For the first bowl contains, in a double circle, a twofold representation of the rites, the lower one of the Bacchanalia, where Liber born in triumph is seen surrounded by satyrs and maenads. Since this triumph contributes nothing to our argument, we pass it over here to avoid multiplying images. The upper circle of the vessel represents ophitic rites, which we show here to the eye, Plate 2, Fig 2. 1. Omitting only the phalli, as we mentioned above, and lest you perhaps think you are looking here at Israelites in the desert attacked by serpents. Their familiarity with handling and even kissing serpents forbids it, and so does the double figure of a certain monster. In one of these, a male and female being who holds a double chain, an eon. We recognize Achamoth or Armetis as the mother. In the other, a monstrous figure furnished with 4 wings. We find her son, the enemy of his mother, Jaldabaoth, of whom there will be fuller discussion below. Since the Ophites, followers of the same Mother Sophia Armetis, strive to abolish the worship established by the Jaldabaoth. This attempt is expressed here by one of the Ophites extinguishing a 7-branch lampstand, a symbol of biblical worship. A double book signifies a double law, one of the Old Testament, that of Sabaoth, the other of the New Doctrine, that of Achamoth. On this book, the type of an Arabic inscription, found the same on all the bowls and idols, is engraved. In the second bowl, besides Metis, see Plate 2, Figure 5, the figures of the sun and moon, see Plate 2, Fig 7 to 8, appear, and the baptism of fire, imposed on an infant placed upon a burning bowl, is shown, see Plate 2, Fig 3. On the other side, a dragon is seen, see Plate 2, Figure 4, from whose jaws attendants snatched the infant. Finally, in the third bowl, besides the ceremonies of the mystical sacrament, Jaldabaoth is seen at the bottom, with an eagle perched upon him, see Plate 2, Face, so that the same figure is recognized as the monster carved on the first bowl. Now we shall explain all these things as far as necessary, so that if we find the same symbols and the same figures in the sculptures of churches of the Templar militia, we may nevertheless already have ascertained their Gnostic meaning. In the largest marble bowl, whose height is 6 finger breadths, and whose figure you see in Plate 2, Figure 14, and the upper reliefs there in Fig 1, a double figure of Metis appears first, both male and female. but clothed in different cloaks. The first, on the left, displays the prototype of the Ophitic faith by an Arabic inscription, but the one on the right shows a broken cross, which is inscribed on the forehead of the idols, plate 1 figs 1 and 2, and is held in the hand of the last idol, plate 1 fig 15 the other. Metis holds with both hands the chain of the eons, which the idols have around their neck, plate 2 fig 6, extended with hands raised. Such a figure is also seen on the covering of a square vessel of the second kind, with a turreted mitre in place of horns. And since this is an ornament of Cybele or Rhea, it supplies new light for tracing the origin of the mother Achamoth. Besides this twofold image of the mother Achamoth, these bowls also display a twofold image of her son Jaldabaoth, one placed in the series of Ophitic orgies between the two symbols mentioned above, the other on the bottom of the third bowl, both seated upon an eagle. In the one he bears a thunderbolt as Lord of heaven and earth. In the other he has a head covering furnished with 4 wings, such as the highest of the eons and archons is seen carved on the so-called Abraxas gems. See Macarius, Abraxas, plate of 4, 25, 26. This is the son of Sophia, Barbello, or Achamoth, who is called Sabaoth or Jaldabaoth. Among the Gnostics, he is the father of 7 archons, the creator and ruler of all things heavenly and earthly. He rebelled against his mother, and exulting in his own glory, he raved and boasted that he was Father and God, and that there was none above him. But his mother, hearing this, cried out against him, "Do not lie, Jaldabaoth, for above you is the first father of all, Anthropos, and Anthropos the son of Anthropos." Irenaeus against Heresies, Book I, Chapter 30 on the Ophites. This, according to the Ophites, is the God of the Jews and Christians, whom they cursed and rejected. The Ophites thought that he waged perpetual war against his mother Achamoth and sought to keep human beings from the knowledge of that same mother, that is, of divine wisdom. Besides the 7 archons, rulers of the 7 heavens, who rebelled against him, as he had rebelled against his mother, he also produced another son in serpent form, that is, the Nous, coiled into the shape of a serpent. This one first offered his service to his father Jaldabaoth to seduce humankind, so that he might drain him of the seed of light, but afterwards, crafty and shrewd, he abandoned the remaining interests of his father, and following Sophia, set out to lead human beings to true knowledge of her, that is, to gnosis and the revelation of all the secrets of nature. Finally, because he represents the twisting coiling of the intestines by his own coils, he was considered by the Ophites a fitting figure to represent generative wisdom, Zogonos Sophia, that is, as our inscription has it. For this reason, among the Ophites he was soon called Nous, soon by the names of the angels Michael and Samael, and was revered as a symbol of wisdom bestowed and as the true guide of gnosis in their rites. The serpent, in all the ancient mysteries of Ceres and Liber, both in the Eleusinian and in the Bacchic, played a chief part, as is known to all. Hence, by that same serpent, the Ophitic and Bacchic orgies, their connection is very hard to make out. But it is made clear by the evidence, for from Clement of Alexandria we learn that among the Bacchic rites there was a certain emblem, an image of a serpent consecrated by a secret ritual. In the Ophite system, we find the serpent and the phallus, which were carried about in Bacchic orgies, and there we see the T-shaped sign which Achamoth holds in her hands and bears upon her forehead. In the bowl we also see, as it were, the tree of life, the serpent. That is the wisdom that upholds generation, keeping a double meaning as it already did among the Egyptians. It represents both the phallus and the key, and therefore, among the Ophites, the tree of life is also called the key of the Gnostics. But besides this, it had a third meaning in Gnostic teaching. Namely, it was the boundary of the Gnostic pleroma, which is called Horus, and its meaning, as we see from the invocation of the archons in origin, was derived from the Egyptian Horus, who, according to Macrobius, is the same as the boundary. This tree of life, which they said was born from Gnosis, and which they now called Gnosis itself, is the key and the boundary, the alpha and omega of every Gnosis. In imitation of the raising of the phallus in Bacchic rites, and we see its form inserted not only into the hand of the mother Achamoth or Meti, but also stamped upon her forehead a figure that marked the character of life, by which, as in Revelation chapter 7, verse 3, the foreheads of the elect are marked. This, then, is the character of Baphomet, and thus, as a part standing for the whole, it signified the instrument of life and the wisdom that begets. The explanation of the two chief symbols of this most disgraceful cult, the caduceus and the phallus, through the bowl and the truncated cross, or T, leads us to two other symbols expressed in these bowls. One, that is, the sun and the moon, which is very frequently seen in the signs of Baphomet. The other, namely the dragon, which is found in the bowls and in the sculptures of the churches of the Templars. The first was taken from the most ancient mysteries. The second was properly Gnostic, indeed Ophitic. The sun and the moon, as presiding over generation, held the first place in those mysteries, where nothing else was done but the exposition of Genesis. The sun, which is the east, according to Macrobius, Saturnalia, Book 1, Chapter 17, generates all things by sowing, producing, and nourishing everything in open light. The moon, which, according to the same Macrobius, in the Dream of Scipio, Book 1, was the boundary between life and death, kept watch over the hidden generation of nature, and therefore their figures are represented in an alabaster bowl in such a way that the sun presides over begetting and the moon over bringing forth. The dragon was not without meaning, as we have written elsewhere. That four-footed monster with its tail bent back, scaly and bristling, seems rather to be a crocodile than a dragon, and you will soon see that it makes no difference whether it is called a crocodile, since in the carving of the bowl, Plate 2, Fig 4, it is shown devouring an infant, and since in the carvings of church vessels the same dragon is represented swallowing an infant, we call it a dragon, because according to Saint Epiphanius, the Ophites taught that the ruler of this world has the form of a dragon, and that he absorbs souls that do not possess gnosis, and then pours them back into this world through his tail. We shall find such a dragon figure swallowing and then disgorging an infant further on in the explanation of the sculptures of the church vessels of Schoongrabber. Here it is enough to note that the man who in the relief of the second bowl pulls the infant from the dragon's jaws represents the Templar, or either the true Gnostic who, by instilling gnosis into the child, prevents it from being swallowed up by the world. To the most precious passage of Saint Epiphanius, which teaches us that he understood the dragon as the ruler of the world among the Gnostics, there is added Origen's Ophite diagram, in which Leviathan is explained by the dragon and is at once confused with Behemoth or the crocodile. The best witness of this confusion is the book of Ibn Washia on unknown alphabets, where the same figure as the diagram describes is depicted, 10 circles and a scarab-shaped monster holding these circles in its hand, which he explains as the soul of the world under the name Baphomet, led by the similarity of the sound when we translated into English the book prefaced by Ibn Washia. We thought that this was a corruption of the word Baphomet, and although the agreement of the sounds, Baphomet and Baphomet is trusted, and this explanation is more probable than the one already worn out. Namely, that Baphomet is a corruption of the name Muhammad. Still, it is supported by no solid argument and must yield to the explanation that our inscriptions, Arabic and Latin alike, which everywhere prefer the name Baphometis, remove all ambiguity. When the explanation of all the figures and symbols of the bowls has been completed, by which the true meaning of father and mother, that is, Ildabath and Achamoth, of the cup and the truncated cross, of the stars and the dragon, has been made clear to us, we shall speak very briefly of the rites expressed there, showing that all three Ophite sacraments, baptism, the Eucharist, and marriage, or rather the most wicked profanation of these sacraments, are displayed in these three bowls, concerning the fiery baptism of the burning bowl, on which we see an infant placed, Plate 1, Fig 14, Fig 3, as we have already said, likewise the Eucharist, where we explain that the Ophites brought forth serpents from the places of the fathers. It remains for us to add a few words about the spiritual marriage that is represented in the third bowl. Irenaeus and Tertullian speak of this spiritual union of the Gnostics, who thus pointed to that universal conflagration of the Stoics. and we clearly perceive that it is portrayed, together with all the nuptial ceremonies in the third bowl, where the bridegroom is figured by a torch set alight. See Plate 2, Series 2. Therefore, once the primitive meaning of the bowl or cup in the mysteries has been explained, and also the transferred meaning derived from it, used as a symbol of fellowship or companionship, we think that something must now be said. No one is unaware that the bowl or cup in the most ancient mystical and religious institutions was also a symbol of the banquet and convivial drinking, and in the same sense it is still understood today among all orders of dervishes, as is confirmed by the clearest testimony, by the name of the bowl of Osiris taken up into heaven, which today among Easterners is called Kase Dervishan, that is, the cup of the dervishes, moreover. This conjecture is also confirmed by the sculptures of the church at Schoongrabbern, where 6 bowls placed close to one another seem likely to indicate 6 communities of Templars. That the cup was also a symbol of the Templars is attested by a passage in Assamani, communicated to us by the most reverend and learned Bishop Mentor. From this it is also inferred that those tombs found in Sicily with cups were Templars' tombs. See Plate 3, Figure 13. After this, there remains no doubt that that famous medieval bowl, known under the name of the Holy Grail, signified nothing other than a symbol of the Templar community and of Gnostic wisdom. The whole tale known under the name of Titurel supports this assertion. There you see the temple built by Titurel for the Holy Grail on Mount Salvez, the Mount of Salvation. Its guardianship is entrusted to Templar knights, the Templars, who defend it with their blood and, fighting for it, wander through the world. If you ask where the most Holy Grail is found, it is always referred to the East, and the mystical exaltation that the poem of Titurel so often breathes, whenever it celebrates this cup in its praises, proves that it implies some hidden secret. The whole temple built by Titurel abounds in such ornaments that it greatly favors our supposition. Among these ornaments, the tablets of Met-Yavon also appear, and that mystical veil brought down from heaven by an angel, which is also described in Titurel and is still seen today in the sculpture of the Templar churches at Altenburg and Berchtoldsdorf, see Plate 3, Figure 5, the meaning of which can be gathered below, where we shall treat these symbols individually. But if, under the Holy Grail, a mystical chalice is understood, the symbol of Gnostic Sophia, then what the round table of 12 knights signifies is clear enough. For from statutes published by Munter, we know that the number 12 was of chief importance in all the Templars' domains. There were 12 electors who, together with the presiding master, chose a new master, 12 dignitaries of the great order. 12 elders of the order, of whom its first senate consisted, 12 in the east called Balii, and as many, it seems, provinces in Europe. Therefore the knights of the Round Table, over whom Arthur presided, most likely represented nothing other than the 12 elders or archons of the Templars. And under the guardians of the Holy Grail, we ought to understand the brothers of the military order themselves, as guardians of the Gnostic chalice, and as Gnostics initiated into the mystery of iniquity. Chapter 5. On the sculptures found in the churches of the brothers of the military order of the temple. In several churches of the brothers of the military order of the temple, there are sculptures and hieroglyphic figures which, since they agree very closely with the symbols of the idols and bowls of which we have spoken in connection with Baphomet and the chalice, confirm the whole of what we have said. Although in examining such sculptures we have also made investigations beyond the borders of the Austrian Empire, none have yet come to our knowledge, either because none exist or because the reports are obscure. Yet it is entirely probable that many more monuments of the Templars still exist, either in chests as idols or on walls as reliefs, which, if brought to light from their concealment or ignorance, would supply new arguments for everything already said and still to be said on this subject. Here, therefore, we shall speak only of the sculptures in 7 Templar churches which have so far escaped the injury of time. 3 of these are in Austria, Schöngraben, Waltendorf, and Berchtoldsdorf, 1 in Hungary in the town of Deutsch-Altenburg, and 2 in the village of Mural, and 2 others are seen in Bohemia, 1 at Prague, the other at Eger, which is our homeland, although it is known that the brothers of the military order of the temple had residences in very many places. No sculptures survive in the churches. and the paintings in the tower at Neukirchen in the district of Scilly were destroyed scarcely a decade ago through the negligence of the local dean, the Church of Schöngrabern. Among all these, the chief monument preserved in a remarkable way through a span of 5 centuries, amid so many disasters. Amid fires and ruins is the church built in the village of Schöngrabern beside the public road that leads from Vienna into western Moravia, near the towns of Dietrichsdorf and Sitzendorf, where the principal dwellings of the brothers of the military order of the Temple are mentioned in their history. So many sculptures are counted in the church of Schöngrabern that it would not be possible to set them all down here. Yet it is not only their multitude that prevents us from publishing them all, since some are placed so high that, without the use of a ladder, they escape the eye, and some represent certain extremely obscene outrages. From these we shall present only the lower series, to confirm our arguments, adding a brief description of the sculptures of the upper series. And we shall leave to the editors of the medieval Spintherian architects a true likeness of them from life. Besides the obscenities and indecencies, this series of images contributes less to the total weight of our arguments, because apart from the heads of Metis and Ealdebouth, the one serene and beautiful, the other savage and foul, the one angelic, the other diabolical, there are several phantasms present which, even if they are not wholly devoid of some hidden meaning, nevertheless, for the present, still keep our interpretations at work in trying to demonstrate them. The reliefs of the Church of Schöngrabern, very prominent and still well preserved, consist of 2 series of images which adorn the semicircular sacristy at the rear of the church, neatly built of squared stones on the outside, so that each series displays a complete system of its own. The lower series is to be examined from left to right, the upper from right to left, and since there are 3 windows in this semicircular building whose walls are marked with these figures, the whole work of imagery is divided into 3 sections, in each of which a separate part of the sculptures is visible, so that 3 stations appear in the upper series and the same number in the lower series. In 3 stations there are as many relief images, of which the first represents the origin and beginning, the second the progress and increase, and the third the end and triumph of Gnosis, that is, the secret doctrine of the Templars, so that after the symbols of the Ophites and other Gnostics have been explained above, there can be no doubt about the true meaning of the images. We see then in the first station the story of the fall of the first formed, a result to which certain additions have been made that have nothing to do with the biblical meaning, and are to be explained only from the inventions of the Gnostics. For Eve is not veiled as modesty requires, rather her hand is completely uncovered. And besides the serpent, a dog attacks her, and the serpent, with its winding coils, twining itself around both the dog and Eve's arm, whispers in her ear and prepares the temptation. Eve, readily yielding with her other hand, offers the apple to Adam. A certain grim figure is shown, whose face presents the likeness of the devil, yet if it is viewed from the left-hand angle, it has a resemblance that cannot be denied to the head of Christ crowned with thorns. This is Jaldabaoth or Sabaoth, who, according to the doctrine of the Gnostics, was trying to restrain Adam lest he fall into the serpent's seduction, which through gnosis, that is, knowledge, was attempting to show the carnal path to the mother Achamoth. See the drawing of this image in Plate 3, Fig. 1. In the middle position, a Templar or Gnostic is seen sitting on a throne, with his right hand either blessing or swearing an oath, and his left hand holding a scepter. As a base for the throne, there lies that monstrous dragon which we already know from the reliefs of the second bowl, where it threatens to swallow an infant, and so that no one may have the slightest doubt that this is the same dragon of which St. Epiphanius speaks as the Gnostic symbol of the ruler of the world, who swallows every man not imbued with gnosis, and then vomits him up again. Here one may see a double infant. One of them sticks in its jaws, the other is expelled again through the lower part of its body, through the anus. See Plate 3, Fig. 2. This is the dragon which their Templar tombs carved in the London Temple display. See Plate 3, Fig. 7, following Martium. This finally is the same dragon which, at the time of the founding of the military order of the Brothers of the Temple, passed from Gnostic commentaries into the life of St. George, and with it, though without the infant, into British insignia. And certainly the Gnostic dragon swallowing an infant gave its origin to the serpent of the Visconti, which is still seen today in the arms of the Kingdom of Milan. And this Gnostic dragon must be clearly distinguished from its adversary, the serpent. The blessing or oath-taking hand and the lily-bearing scepter present the same figure as that, by which on the most ancient medieval coins, emperors or bishops sitting on thrones are depicted, blessing and ruling the world. The scepter here signifies dominion over the world. The people standing by the throne indicate to the Templar or Gnostic, or if you prefer, to the Order of the Temple or to Gnosis seated on the throne, the fruits and animals of the earth, grain and sheep, being brought as a gift. From various passages of Scripture, it is to be inferred that the Gnostics judged that in the right hand, with 2 fingers bent and 3 raised, there was some hidden and peculiar power to be present. We judge that these passages have been perversely twisted to their own meaning, such as, the right hand of the Lord has shown strength, which is carved on the tombstone in Sealander P. 112, Plate B, where the blessing right hand covers the upper part of the cross in such a way that it displays the truncated figure of a T, that is the sign of Baphomet. Similar scriptural texts are also these, with a mighty hand God brought you out of Egypt, Exodus 13:10. I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians, and the hand of the Lord will be upon your cattle, Exodus 9:22. In the third station, Plate 3, Fig 3, a lion is seen, which the Templar kills with the help of 2 dogs, one of which seizes the lion from behind. This is the triumph of the Gnostics, or of Ophitic spiritual doctrine, over the religion of the god of Sabaoth, who among the Gnostics was called Jaldabaoth and was trampled underfoot in the form of a lion, as well as of a dragon. He shall trample the lion and the dragon, Psalm 91:13. Here, however, he is no longer being trampled as a sign of contempt, as the Templars expressed by trampling on the crucifix, but is now being slaughtered by the Templar with the help of that Hodiji, who everywhere in these sculptures introduces that mystical thing, the infamous kiss by which, at their reception, the Templars kiss the spine of the back. You also see such a dog kneeling behind the idol, taken from a little book of curiosities, and here drawn in plate I figure 4, in which we recognize nothing other than a Gnostic or a Templar who, by means of a dog clinging to the rear parts, indicates nothing other than the most shameful scandal of the Templars. Hence, it is likely that, under the cat repeatedly mentioned in the accusation against the Templars, a kitten or a dog is meant. Through this slaughtered lion, it becomes clear what the axe and the lion skin depicted on the idols and on the temple bowls were meant to signify. The axe, shown as the instrument for killing the lion, see on the base of the 2-headed Baphomet, Plate I, Fig 9, and in the procession of the mystical couple in the bowl, Plate 2, Fig 2, and likewise the lion skin as a trophy of the lion already slain, is tied around the loins of the idols, see Plate 2 and 6, like a loincloth. Although the axe was already carried in the most ancient mysteries of the Bona Dea, and the loincloth was already in use among the Essenes, the more proper architectural sense of the loincloth is to be found in this Templar loincloth rather than in the Essene one. See then here in the 3 lower series of reliefs the origin, progress, and end of the Gnostic or secret Templar doctrine, suitably represented through the hieroglyphic images of the Tree of Knowledge, the Templar seated on a throne, and the slaughtered lion. Although it is not my purpose to examine and explain all the sculptures of this work, since in many places architectural ornaments are also to be seen, still a brief mention should be made of those that help to confirm our arguments. For just as the lower series of sculptures moving from left to right sets forth the whole symbolic history of the Gnosis and of the Templar order, so the upper system of reliefs proceeding from right to left embraces the Gnostics or the Templars' biography from childhood all the way to death. In the first station, a boy is seen the future Ophite or Gnostic Templar, shamelessly handling a bear, animal in this respect liable to the same vice, so that among the Arabs the proverb wetter than the bear is commonly repeated, which, as it indicates, is the reason why the Templar To avenge himself on his fosterling, runs at the bear with a spear, to pierce it and to draw the child toward his own enticements. Something the dog mentioned above also hints at, not obscurely. On the other side, the boy, now grown into an adolescent, resists the blandishments of a girl who tries to lure him by offering flowers. But he nonetheless remains unmoved, with his arms crossed upon his chest and spurns female allurements. Between these two erotic sculptures of early boyhood and adolescence, a stone of joining with a head and a square lid represents the order of the temple. To it 2 Templars, clothed in the habit of the order and girt, cling, yet indicating the support of their future life, the cornerstone and the key of the Gnostic building. The architectural ornaments around this station agree very well with the same Bacchic meaning, for they are composed of clusters of grapes and vine leaves, intermingled with phalli set so high that they can scarcely be distinguished from the lower part, all of which, after the lapse of 5 centuries, are still plainly visible. The station that is in the middle of the upper series, like the first, is divided into 3 parts. In place of the human or angelic head of the Gnosis, or of the Order of the Temple, there is there the devilish head of Jaldabaoth, who with one hand draws to himself a woman, Metin, with the other a Templar resisting, and thus he represents the tribulations and adversities by which Gnosis and its followers are assailed by Jaldabaoth. Another Templar escapes happily from these persecutions of the demon, riding upon a lion, and is carried along as though the beast were almost tamed and obedient to him. To this fleeing Templar from the other side, a dolphin, as it seems, answers, so striking the bird in this way that its head is swallowed up by it. Since the lower part of the dolphin is cut off and only the upper remains, it is not permissible to assert what animal is represented there. Although it is figures of a dolphin and a bird, a dove to be sure, sporting together and kissing one another, may be seen in the golden cross of the Templars preserved at Semilly, belonging to Prince Augustus, Archduke Anton, Grand Master of the Teutonic Knights. The third panel, like the 2 earlier ones divided into 3 parts, displays an abundant richness of figures at the top in the stone of the vaulting or in the keystone. The same head we already saw in the first panel appears with a master's cap. Both hands are outstretched, the left swearing or blessing, the right holding a book of the new law of the Gnostics, that is, or the Templar's secret teaching. On the right side, where the book is, a veiled meat holds an infant in her lap and offers it the fruit of the Gnostic tree, an apple, namely. Yet amid so great a number of profane figures, this woman cannot be taken for the Virgin Mother of God, because the whole style of her veil, which plainly recalls that idol, and the necklace forbids it, by which we recognize that gilded aureate, which, according to the articles of accusation against the Templars, they wore as an idol upon the neck. Beside the blessing hand, 6 vessels or mystical bowls are set in a varied arrangement, 3 in a row, 2 above and 1 apart. Their meaning is hidden, but since each of these bowls has already been understood as a symbol of mystical societies, perhaps these indicate 6 balias or chapter houses of the Brothers of the Military Order of the Temple, which from this seat govern the order in Austria. Or, if you prefer, some Gnostic scenery meaning may be sought here, the number that among the Pythagoreans was called generative and a marriage. Among the Gnostics, moreover, Jaldabaoth commanded that man be formed by 6 powers, that is, by archons who correspond exactly to the Amshas bands of the Natchez. Likewise, since the world was created in 6 days, these 6 mystical bowls, which signified the vessels of generation, should be referred to that. With the middle panel sufficiently explained, in the last we turn first to the right, then to the left. On the right you see the veiled woman with the infant, such as we already observed among the idols with her head covered and the child. That demon Jaldabaoth tries with his hand to pull her away, or to draw her to himself. With his other hand holding a pitchfork, he selects one head with the fork from 3 human heads that have been heaped together with other things in a chest. If in this woman, with her head covered, meat is to be recognized, what these 3 heads might mean for her, though I would not assert it as certain, I think it may be conjectured that these heads are the founders of the 3 religions, Mosaic, Christian, and Islamic, who, serving God Sabaoth or Jaldabaoth, spread among men, the worship of the same are lacking, and therefore, by the unbelievers of that age, when this church was built, they were designated under the name of 3 impostors. On the left, the end of the Templar's life is shown, now lying dead upon the earth, with the Archangel Michael holding the balance of judgment and weighing his deeds. In the pan are placed apples, sweetmeats, and other blandishments of the senses, by which the ophitic life of the Templar is represented as descending to earth. It shows that he favors Michael's judgment, which Jaldabaoth tries to hinder, attempting to press down the other pan as it rises. This allegory of the balance of judgment, about which we spoke more fully in our commentary on the Mummy, p. 288, corresponds very well to the whole Gnostic doctrine, since, as we saw above, the serpent, whom we called the Savior among the Gnostics, is named Michael, and plays the part of judge, and in this way, weighing the life of the Templar or Gnostic on the day of judgment, he accepts all that man's crimes as good works. Thus, the cycle of the Gnostic's life, which we saw educated from the earliest years of childhood toward gnosis, that is, the doctrine of innate wisdom, and then pursued by Jaldabaoth, here is brought to an end with his death and the final judgment. And this double series of reliefs sets forth the twofold story of the Gnostic and of gnosis, that is, of the Templar and of the whole, or besides these reliefs are mentioned. In the very sanctuary of the church, the lion's feet carved in stone are seen, which are symbols of Jaldabaoth, and here inspire terror by his footprints. And in the 4 corners, the 4 evangelists are represented in the form of 3 animals and a demon in place of an angel, in a ridiculous manner. In the stall, however, belonging to the dean's area of the church, 3 Templar reliefs set into the wall are noted, and brought here from the ruins of the chapter house, now a cellar and wine press. Clothed in the solemn habit of the order, they hold in one hand a sword, in the other the sign of Baphomet, namely the phallus, that is the key of gnosis, shaped like a cross. To the Templars' church at Waltendorf, where the mountains descend into the plain of Teyern, the church of Waltendorf rises. That it belonged to the Templars is attested not only by the sculptures, but also by idols having a double head, which in the year 1792 were dug up from a certain underground place previously unknown. These idols, partly wooden, partly of clay, partly of stone, believed by the diggers to be the work of devils, were thrown aside and for some time served as children's playthings, as many still living affirm. That these idols were none other than Baphomet is easily established from their description. From the southern part of this church, a heap of rubble is seen to have arisen, which, as may likely be proved, shows that the fragments belong to a monastery building on the southern side. Finally, on the outside of the wall, various reliefs have been inserted, 3 of which, according to Isla's drawing and explanation. A fuller account may be seen in the archive for geography, history of state, and military science. 44 and 45 are to be observed here. See Plate 3. Figs 14, 15, 16. There you see a Templar knight who with one hand holds a branch or a flaming sword, and with the other a staff shaped like the sign of Baphomet. Then a dog, figured 14. And finally the Templar himself, whose cap is the same as that of those idols, seated upon the skin of a lion already slain, represented in the form of a small boat, and touching its tail, figure 16. All 3, the dog and the lion, are, as we have already shown, pure symbols of the Templars and the Elphites. The church of Berchtoldsdorf, in the village of Berchtoldsdorf, commonly called Petersdorf, which lies not more than 2 hours from Vienna, the church and the chapter house, together with the ruins of the monastery, are so well preserved that it is astonishing how they have endured through so many centuries amid so many disasters and Turkish sieges. In the church itself, built in the Gothic style, no sculptures are noticeable, but in its choir a huge sign of Baphomet is seen. A T made of 2 large stones, one set upright and the other crosswise. On the exterior of the church above the gate, a relief appears, though half broken away, which might perhaps be taken for an image of God the Father and God the Son, by those who have not been initiated into the secret doctrine of the Templars. But since it presents the same appearance as that scepter-bearing figure in the Skuengraben reliefs, seated upon a dragon, and since it has, besides, a female veil spread above the head, we think it not unreasonable that it indicates the first order of the Templars and the second, the Matin. To the south of the church, there still stands a Templar monastery, almost indeed destroyed, but with the entire arrangement of the building excellently preserved. Near the church at Skångrabbern, there likewise used to be a monastery to the south, upon whose foundations today we see a public inn built. That a monastery of this kind always adjoins the church on the south seems to have been not by chance but by design in imitation of the dwelling at Jerusalem, which, as William of Tyre testifies, the king granted them in the palace on the southern side of the temple site. With this principle of placement, the monastery set beside the temple of Tichrol agrees remarkably well. Hence, it is confirmed that the temple in Tichrol was the model of all Templar churches, or rather, that it was fashioned by the poet after their likeness, the church at Altenburg. In the Hungarian town of Deutsch Altenburg, almost on the border of Austria, there stands an old church of the Templars in which, on the wall above the gate, a certain mystical figure is displayed, drawn on plate 3-5. Its meaning can rightly be interpreted from the Gnostic commentaries already known. You see here Metin or Achamoth of male and female form, clothed in a mystical cloak and bearded. An angel confronts him with a veil. For when in the Pleroma, see note 52, Sophia, Achamoth, Metin, met the angels, and, seeing them naked, blushed, she snatched up a veil to cover her head. This, then, is the veil offered to her by the angel in this relief, and that is what is described in Tichrol, so that it must not be denied that that description was taken entirely from some Gnostic representation. For mention is made of an angel descending from heaven and bringing a veil, and of a dove likewise descending from heaven, which signified the Holy Spirit. For the Gnostics considered Achamoth herself to be the Holy Spirit, and represented her under the form of a dove. 53. The church of the village of St. Martin in the county of Saladin. On the borders of Styria and Hungary in the district called Mirau, we learn from the travel account of the late most illustrious Count Teleki, travels through Hungary and some neighboring lands. p. 216. That there exists a church of the Templars, adorned with various hieroglyphic sculptures of profane subjects and furnished with underground chambers. We have taken care to have one of these drawings. Together with all the other sculptures we present here, engraved on copper, but after 6 months had passed, during which we waited for these figures, promised by the most excellent Count George Festetics, to be sent here to be appended to this dissertation, the time of the year, now already pressing upon us, finally warned us not to delay any longer in bringing it to light. Therefore, from some information about this Church of St. Martin the bishop in the peninsula called Mirau in Pannonia, which we were able to learn from letters of the parish priest, the Reverend Jos Horwath, through a friend, we add the following. That this church once belonged to the Templars is proved by the fact that the church of Novi Dvore, Ujudvar, a daughter church of it, a quarter of an hour distant from it, was formerly their college and flourished until the year 1277, as Centovani testifies in his parallel dissertation, Catalogue 44, the aforesaid Nova Curia, which as a daughter looked to the mother church of St. Martin, was subject to the preceptory under the prior of the monastery of Arana in Croatia. Likewise, in the time of Bishop Augustine Gazati, who in the year 1313 was appointed Bishop of Zagreb, the convent of the Crusading Knights in the Church of the New Court on the island of Muradrvana, above Staktornia as is known from the histories. The year which is seen inscribed on the left side of the arch of the altar in the Church of St. Martin bears witness to some fairly recent repair of the same building, namely in 1468 Dior. The sculptures, however, certainly ought to be referred to the secret teaching of the Templars from a century, or even 2 centuries, earlier. They consist of figures of a red cross of various sizes and of heads, which display, as it were, the character of Metis or of Joldabath. And it is difficult to judge this from a distance. Of other remaining churches or monasteries of the Templars in Hungary, although we have searched very diligently, we have been able to discover nothing certain. This alone should be noted. Coins to be illustrated below, found in the ruins of a certain building not far from Sikhet, a village in the county of Veszprém. testify that this building belonged to the Templars. The common people attribute it to this order. They call it Revelatum, that is, the Red Brothers. And in the past year, enormous stones were still there, on whose surfaces various figures were carved. But they have been turned to use as millstones. Bracteate coins found there in a clay pot are, for the most part, the same as the bracteate coins taken from a clay pot and from the rubble of the Templar monastery at Woltendorf. And as the bracteate coins found in a clay pot in the ruins of the Templars' fortress at Neunkirchen in the district of Scilly and Styria. Thus these coins, coming from the ruins of Templar houses in Austria, Styria, and Hungary, provide remarkable testimony through the agreement of their type, the Church at Prague. According to the testimony of the principal writers of Bohemian history, who are as follows. 1. The Continuator of Cosmos. 2. Hajek. 3. Poprotsky. 4. Betskovarsky. 5. Gelasius Dobner. 6. Pubichka. 7. Voigt. 8. Riddle. 9. Pelzel. 10. Rohn. 11. Dubravius. 12. Terst. Hammerschmidt. The Prague house, with its monastery, in the name of St. Wenceslas, was first begun by a king of that name around the year 1249, and was completed around the year 1253. The architect of it was a lay brother named Anastasius, who in the space of 15 years also built various Templar houses and hospices in places called Tischenbach, Zwickau, Hluboka, Berglitz, and Stara. In the year 1311, after the suppression of the order, the church with the monastery was handed over by King John to the Knightly Order of St. John, and then, under the priorate of Berchtold of Henneberg, it was sold to the Order of Nuns under the rule of St. Dominic. In the year 1782, after the suppression of the nuns, the church with the monastery was bought and is still possessed by the Equitus Kuhnfeld, a man most curious about antiquities and very skillful in preserving them, who generously shared many things with us. There are their most precious monuments of two kinds, namely, stained glass in the windows, painted with outstanding artistry in the medieval manner, and others painted in colors on the walls of the cloisters, commonly called the Kreisgang, which for several centuries lay covered with a coating of lime. But now, the covering having collapsed or been scraped away, shine with their colors excellently preserved, as if laid on in oil. 15 painted panes of glass, which you see in plate 4, note 13, all display the same figures, and certain thin bracteate coins of that age show those figures one by one, figures not understood by numismatists up to now, which have provided material for various discussions. But we shall show below in a numismatic excursus, that all of them represent nothing other than Medan. 24 architectural symbols, marked on the same plate under the letter B, are painted in the cloister above the wall on roundels, whose diameter is 12 fingers. We shall soon prove that these temple symbols are the same as the architectural ones. Here it is only to be noted that, besides the familiar tools of the masons, there also appear here the sun and the moon and a star and a sword and a truncated cross and 7 serpents, all of which are plainly Templar symbols, or Ophite temple symbols. Concerning the 7 serpents, or the Hydra serpent furnished with 7 heads. See as a Gnostic symbol also the mystical hymn of the Thebaic Gnostics, which the Reverend Bishop and most learned Dr. Mentor made public. And he has commented at length there on the Gnostics and the Ophians, whom, however, he suspects, though not rightly, of being the Templars, innocent as they were, the church at Eger. In this city, famous in Bohemian histories for so many and such great events of the Middle Ages, there stand on the castle hill 2 very ancient churches, one above, the other underground beneath it. Here, at the time of the schism, Catholics and the Reformed celebrated their rites at the same time. But in antiquity, this was a building of the Templars, who, as everywhere, used the underground church as their chapter house. There are seen there, in place of cornerstones and the keystones of the vaulting, most obscene figures, all pertaining to Ophite Genesis or Gnosis. You see these ornaments of the columns and the capitals carved in plate 4, figure 31, a man and a woman shamelessly displaying their sex. Fig 32, Baphometic heads raised on the tops of the columns. Fig 33, sphinxes, of which there will be mentioned below in the numismatic excursus, and sometimes the same figure appears on those bracteate coins. Plate 5, now compare figures 29, 30, 31, and 45. Finally, in figure 34, serpents are seen, winding with twisted coils and embracing one another with dogs' heads, such as are found in Abraxas and other Gnostic monuments. See plate 4, figures 1, 2, 3, 4. Under the same number, in the lower figure, you also see a bird and a serpent joined into one body and meeting at the base, such as are seen on plate 4, figures 11 and 12. One of these, showing dolphins in place of the serpent, is preserved as an ornament of the cross of the Templars in the treasury of the Grand Master of the Teutonic Knights. Figures of this kind also seem to have been carved in the church at Prague, mentioned above. Yet the reliefs of all those cornerstones and the keystones of the vaulting have been scraped away, something that certainly should not be attributed to the injuries of time, but to the pious zeal of monks, who, since they could not remove such sculptures from sight as they might paintings covered with whitewash, preferred to destroy them. After these, several descriptions of Templar churches in the Austrian Empire, hitherto not yet described, may be recognized as belonging to such works, or at least as the work of Gnostic architects. Several such churches may still be seen, both in Germany and in France. Among the first, we make special mention of the church at Erfurt. Among the second, the church on Mount Montholon in Poitou. The Templars' church at Erfurt, today called St. Michael's, restored 4 centuries ago from the ruins of a fire, displays no monument of greater antiquity. But in other churches of this city, there are many architectural monuments which, although they cannot be proved to be Templar, we nevertheless take to be architectural ornaments or symbols of that age, since they agree especially with the sculptures at Schoengraben. There, too, you see a bear that seizes a man, as in the Schoengraben sculptures, and there, too, on the high western supports outside, are dogs, and in the church itself, in place of a caryatid, a boy standing on his hands and raising what is called a paiget. And finally, on a stone of the vaulting, a certain monster most shamefully embracing an upside-down child, as though kissing it. See plate 4, figures 1, 2, 3. Similar figures, hieroglyphic heads, animals, and monsters are also found, as Millen testifies, in several churches of southern France, especially in Poitou, which was the principal seat of the Templars. Most notable of all is the octagonal church on Mount Montholon, which Montfaucon indeed assigns to the ancient Gauls, but which Millen restored to the Middle Ages. See Monuments Antiques, Inedits, Fetiaris. 323, and Voyage dans le Département du Midi de la France, Alvosor 3732. Among the statues seen there, 200 see plate 4 fig, are certainly ophitic. Chapter 6. On the doctrine of the Ophites, although in explaining the monuments we have already touched on many points of the most iniquitous doctrine of all these Gnostic sects, we think it best, for a clearer explanation, to set out here in summary the system of the Ophians as it is found in the writings of the Fathers, and therefore we shall quickly run through these excerpts so that we may show how the Ophite orgies are bound up with the most ancient mysteries. No one doubts that the doctrine of the Ophians was not merely a sect of the Gnostics, but a heresy sprung from heresies. Therefore, many things about which the most weighty historians of the Ophians, Irenaeus, Epiphanius, and Theodoret, are silent in their account of Ophite dogmas, must be drawn from the general teaching of the Gnostics, and especially from the history of the Valentinians. And indeed, in our monuments, very many such points are found, for the explanation of which passages taken only from the general Gnostic system are suitable. For brevity's sake, those for whom this is not enough should read through Mosheim's history of the Ophians. First of all, we think it should be noted that the proper interpretation of the word gnosis, which in the scripture signifies true wisdom, has been perversely twisted. Therefore, nothing concerns us here that belongs to the Neoplatonic Gnostic, whose spiritual system is set forth in the apocryphal books of Hermes Trismegistus, nor anything that belongs to the Christian Gnostic, who is presented by the holy Clement of Alexandria in the books of the Stromata as the perfect model of wisdom, nor anything that belongs to Christian heretics in general, but rather to the utterly profligate Ophite Gnostics, who, though they proclaim Christ, are in no way at all to be called Christians. Their doctrine, taken from the commentaries of the most ancient mythology of the Greeks, Phoenicians, and Egyptians, enlarged the old teaching of Eastern philosophy with its own fictions. And by its impious interpretation, it so mangled the true fabric of the Bible that from it there emerged a certain unspeakable monster. If you wish to trace back the origin of the true Ophite doctrine, you can easily derive it from Plato himself, who, according to Eusebius, was the first to establish the worship of the serpent. In the most ancient religions of all nations, the serpent plays a principal role, as in the Indian, Orphic, and Druidic. Yet most of those who have inquired into the origin of serpent worship, such as the very learned English mythologist Faber, in the origin of pagan idolatry, have not distinguished well enough the serpent's twofold meaning, since the principle of evil or typho was represented by the dragon, but the principle of good, agathodaimon or nous, by the serpent. Now, leaving aside for the present inquiry the origin of the Ophite doctrine, let us proceed to set forth the system of the Gnostics. From the depth, that is, the abyss, called First Father, Eon, Proch, and Perfect, with whom dwelt in Noea, also called Charis, also CJ, Silence, there proceeded Nous Mind, who is also called the Second Father, and Arch, and Monogenes, and is said to be the firstborn son in truth. These begot Logos, that is the Word, and Zoe, that is life, from whom arose the first man and the first church, the prototype of the first man, and of the church on earth, from this first ideal Ogdode, whose seat is called the Pleroma. That is, the fullness or the spiritual universe. Other aeons produced 10 and again 12, so that their number was 30. Among these the last was Sophia, that is wisdom or the Holy Spirit, who among the various sects of the Gnostics, bearing different names, was called Achamoth, Prunikos, Barbello, Noria, and Enthymesis, and would have been dissolved had not Horus, that is the boundary of all things figured under the image of a cross, come to meet and restrain this most wretched craving, crying out, Io, the end of desire, therefore was the cross, which otherwise was called Horus, also foundation, and Lytrodes, that is the releaser, Carpistes, that is the fruit bearer, Horohetes, that is the one who sets a boundary, and Metagetus, that is the guide. Sophia, struck by the cry, Yao, withdrew into the Pleroma, but Enthymesis, that is her thought, or rather her better will, which had yielded to the desire of knowing the Father, was cast out beyond the Pleroma, that is, beyond the seat of the Aeon, and then was no longer called Enthymesis but Achamoth. She was also called male and female, and likewise metropoter by the Ophians, as though she were one and the same Aeon. She, as formerly her mother, Sophia, had been driven by the desire of knowing the Father, went forth, inflamed with the desire of knowing Christ. And Christ met her, and as Horus had cried to the mother, cried out, Yell, struck by this cry! She produced matter in such a way that from her tears water was born. And from her laughter, when turned toward Christ, she remembered him, light was born. Christ left on earth the only begotten Paraclete. He, with the angels, met Enthymesis, now called Achamoth. And when she saw the Paraclete and the naked angels, she was suffused with shame and covered her head with a veil. Then from her shame she produced all beings, material, animal, and spiritual. She also produced the Demiurge, who is also the third father, namely from the first father, Bythos, and the second father, Monogenes, this son of Achamoth, established outside the Pleroma, the seat of the perfect eons, created the world with distinct animal and material substance, and the sevenfold order of the heavens, which is called the Sabbath, set in opposition to the Pleroma. This Demiurge, or creator of heaven and earth, Jaljaldabaoth, or Sabaoth as he is called, together with the 6 archons, his sons, and with their mother Sophia, established, according to the lower Ogdode. From the fluid of his mother, Sophia's tears, the Demiurge fashioned man, both animate and material, not by himself alone, but aided by the 6 archonic powers, his sons. He called them into partnership in the creation of man with these words, Come, let us make man in our image. When he had formed him, the Demiurge, endowed only with demonic power and not knowing the supreme God, the only begotten, said in his pride, I am Father and God, Sabaoth. And besides me there is no one. But his mother Achamoth, hearing this, answered him, Do not lie, Jaldabaoth, for above you is Anthropos, the first man of the Pleroma and the son of Anthropos, Jaldabaoth. As he was forming man with the help of his 6 assistants, breathed into him a portion of the divine light with which he himself was filled. And therefore man, at once endowed with mind, began to give thanks to the first man in the Pleroma. That is, to the true only begotten God, no longer honoring the maker Jaldabaoth and his 6 helpers. This teaching of the Valentinians and other Gnostics concerning the Pleroma and the higher Ogdod seems to have been less widely spread among Neophytes, who, looking rather to the lower Ogdod, were chiefly occupied with the disputes that arose after the creation of man between Jaldabaoth and his mother Achamoth. Were Jaldabaoth jealous of the portion of light in the man he had formed, Adam, determined to draw it out of him through the woman Eve, but the mother prevented this. She brought the serpent, who was also another son of Jaldabaoth, over to her side, and through him persuaded Eve to entice Adam, contrary to Jaldabaoth's command to eat the fruit of the tree of life and knowledge. And by this knowledge, the true way to the mother Achamoth was shown. When this very brief outline of the Gnostic and Ophitic system has been completed, all the symbols expressed in our idols, representing the mother Achamoth or Meton, are explained by a very recent interpretation in a new light. We shall touch on 12 of these principal symbols one by one, and we have taken care to have them engraved separately in copper, so that their hidden meaning and their identity with all the symbols of the Freemasons may appear more clearly. Besides the palm branch, the skull, and the sword, 3 things common to the Ophitic Templars and to the Freemasons, the following are the chief 12 symbols: 1, a truncated cross; 2, a bowl; 3, a serpent; 4, a veil; 5, a chain; 6, a girdle; 7, a rod; 8, a book; 9, a 7-branched lampstand; 10, the sun; 11, the moon; 12, a star; 1. The truncated cross, which we have shown to have a double meaning, namely, the phallus and the nail, the wood of life and the key of knowledge, and to be in truth the Baphometic sign by which those joined to Metis by love were marked. The mystical cup, a vessel of generation and a symbol of the Trelad Threedural. The serpent, a guide to true knowledge, indicates the license of the foulest acts by its coils, like the entrails of a twisted shell, and because of its cunning was called the Etasmocrator 4, that mystical veil by which Achamoth, having seen the nakedness of the angels, covered her head. The meaning of this veil, misunderstood as time went on, was believed among the architectonics to signify the veil of the temple. And even the nail, Quasin, hanging from the cloak of Metis, was interpreted as the fringe of the veil. See Plate 1, Figs 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 5, the hermetic chain encircling the neck of Metis like a collar. See Plate 1, Figs 1, 6 to 6. The apron of Metis, made from the skin of a slain lion, signifies the abolished worship of Jaldabaoth. See Plate 1, Figs 2, 6, 7, the rod with which the orgies of the union are led, and the axe with which the lion is to be slain. See Plate 2, Fig 2 and Plate 3, Fig 3. 8, the 7-branch candlestick, likewise a symbol of the old worship being extinguished, and we see it extinguished in the Ophitic rites. See Plate 2. The Book of the New Law, or the Code of Secret Doctrine, Ophitic, Templar, Architectonic. See Plate 2, Fig 1, 10, 11, 12. The sun, the moon, and the star in the idols and in the bowls are symbols of the generative power and of the new doctrine. This is the star, which among the French architectonics is called the Flaming Star, and among the Germans, the Sigma Stern. And by that name, the inscription cited below of the Templars, marked Metis Charity, is confirmed all the more. See Plate 2, Figs 5, 7, 8. These symbols, since they are still in use among the architectonics today, and since much inquiry has been made into their true origin, prove that most of them are of the greatest antiquity and were already employed in various ancient mysteries. 1, it is clear from the writings of the architectonics that the mallet among them took the place of the truncated cross, which signifies the phallus and the nail. See Sigma Sterni, 266 to 180, 193 to 262. but the meaning of this hieroglyphic sign has already been stated above. 2. We have described the bowls, 3 of which are preserved in the treasury of the Royal Caesarean collection, and twice, 3 of which are seen in the sculptures of the Templar Church at Schongravit. And today, among the architectonics, they are represented by the same number of patents, C. Sigmastern, I. P327. In the Mysteries of Cybele, we find both the Vela Cernos, so-called, and the symbol from which one drank. Clement of Alexandria, Exhortation, P14. He had a bowl as well in the Bacchic and Orphic Mysteries, as he had first in the Mithraic and Isiac rites. 3. The girdle, which among the architectonic brethren signifies unity, and among the Templars was taken in the sense of a most disgraceful association, and which from the most ancient times down to today among the Brahmins, and the Magi is known by all to be held as a most sacred bond and mystical tie of religion. See what is said about this girdle in the writings of the Persians concerning the causti from which the cestus is to be derived, and in the Brahminic system of Brother Paulinus. 4. The veil with which Achamoth, that is Mei, covered her head. We think this should be referred to the peplos of Pherecydes, which Origen against Celsus, Book 6, p. 303, and Clement of Alexandria, Stramata, Book 6, pp. 621. Mention, see the fragments of Pherecydes edited by Sturz, p. 51. Since with this veil among the Ophionites, the serpentine spirit, and the tree and the battle against God are spoken of. We do not doubt that beneath these fables lies a most ancient tradition about the fall of man through the serpent, and about the veil with which Eve, leaving paradise, indicated that her nakedness must be covered. These commentaries of Pherecydes, confused with the traditions of Scripture, seem to have provided the Gnostics an occasion for the tale of the veil with which Achamoth, on seeing the naked angels, covered her face. 5. The symbolic chain which closes the banquets of the architectonics, see Signet Sterna 3, p. 121. It hangs from the necks of the idols like a torque. In its place, the architectonics wind a rope around the neck, see Signet Stern I, p. 120. And there were p. 65. We have said that this should be referred to the Hermetic chain of the Neoplatonists, and to the chain of the gods in Homer. 6. The apron with which the idols of the Templars, and today the architectonics, are girded, was not only in use among the Essenes, but already in the mysteries of Eleusis. It was required in the rite of the final initiation. The Baptists were girded with the skin of a fawn called nibrismos. See Researches on the Mysteries of Paganism, Vol. IP 347. 7. The ferula carried in the hands of one of the mystic attendants, which is carved on the bowl as the second figure, is also brandished in the rites of Sabazius, as is to be seen from the work cited above, Sievel's II, p. 96. Perhaps the architectonic ruler, the lineal, corresponds to this ferula, even if the identity is not evident. Thus, conversely, although several architectonic instruments are not depicted on our idols and bowls, nevertheless, in mathematical figures they are seen everywhere on idols and bowls, on temple images, and on Gnostic seals. See also the plates prefixed from Nicolaus' book on Abraxas, in place of such instruments as the rectangular rule, the compass, and the per-elite plumb line. We find, of course, their shapes, the rectangle, the circle, and the triangle. And in the paintings of the windows of the Templar Church at Prague we saw, most carefully drawn, all the instruments of architecture. See plate 4, 14, 8, 9. The book and the 7-branched lampstand, which signify the New and Old Testament, are taken from this. 10. 11. It would be superfluous to try to prove that the moon and the sun were among the most ancient gods of all nations. In the Eleusinian mysteries, the moon and the sun were represented by the Deduchus and the Epibomus. 397, 12. The star that shining and radiant one of the architects is certainly none other than Lucifer, in which Mithras, the genius of the sun, according to the Zen books, dwells, and in which even today, according to the poets' myths of the Persians, Anaitis resides, whose lyre, in place of strings, resounds with solar rays. We have already said that the letter G inscribed by the architects on this star has the same meaning as on our monuments. See Plate 2 Fig 9, namely, that it is Gnostic. Die höchsten Grade, der Freimaurerei, Berlin, 1804. p. 25. Besides these symbols common to the Templars and the architects, there are certain others of theirs which it must not be denied also came into use among the Templars, although we find no trace of them either in the sculptures of idols and bowls or in the exposition of the Gnostic systems. Such are, for example, the very famous pillars of Solomon's temple, Jachin and Boaz, which recall to memory those earlier pillars of Hermes and of Hercules. Of these, to be sure, there is no trace in bowls and idols, but in the Templars' Church of St. Anne at Prague they are seen painted, and also carved on the wall of the very famous castle of Pottenstein, which was a seat of the Templars. There, too, you see a female figure furnished with breasts, who because of the mallet is commonly called the builder, set most fittingly between two columns, so that by her own effort she supports both as they sway and threaten ruin. Plate 3, Fig 9, this is that Mede or Sophia, who here, in place of the Baphometic emblem bearing this mallet, strives to prop up the already tottering columns of Solomon's temple with all her strength, arms and back, or, if we speak in the very words of the inscription, to support them, marked by virtue and charity. These two swaying columns are the same ones which, after the abolition of the brothers of the knighthood of the temple, collapsed into the form of the cross of St. Andrew, which the whole strength of the architect strives to raise again. In distinct words, joined together, only two letters are read there. Plate 3, Fig 12. The charity marked by meat drives out enemies. We shall prove further below that this charity marked by Mede was nothing other than pederasty. For now it will be enough to touch on Mede in the 4, that it had been marked with the sign T, the Baphometic character. See Plate 1, Fig 1, which the Ophians too seem to have adopted, along with many other things from the Mithrite rites. For, to use Tertullian's words on Prescription 40, Mithras marks his soldiers on the forehead, and under the sword he crowns them. Besides these columns, about which nothing has yet been gathered from idols, bowls, and writings of the Gnostics, and which nevertheless are found in church paintings and in the sculptures of the Templars' fortress, other architectural doctrines as well, of which there is nothing in our monument to us already in the secret. Teaching of the Templars, for example, the myth of Hiram slain, whose columns we see painted in the church windows and carved on the walls of the fortress of Pottenstein. In the architect who supports these columns, male and female, we recognize no one other than Métis herself, and therefore we do not rashly judge that, under the architect Hiram killed by the three masters, nothing else should be understood than gnosis or natural religion. Sacrificed by the three masters, whose three heads we mentioned above, these are those three heads that are seen on a Gnostic seal. See Plate 4, Fig 5, which in the Schumgraberry reliefs Jaldabaoth draws out of a certain hiding place with a trident, and which are signified by three knots of an architectural belt. Moreover, besides these three heads, hated by Gnostics and Templars alike, we find three animals also abominated by the Templars and by the architects, the lion, the dragon, and the bear. In the reliefs of idols, bowls, and Templar churches, we have seen them represent the god Jaldabaoth, ruler of the world, and author of softness and effeminacy. Likewise, the lion, the bear, and the tiger, here substituted for the dragon, are for the architects hostile animals that disturb the peace of the Blessed Valley. Many other points of agreement between the Gnostics and the architects we shall touch on briefly. St. John, whom the architectural societies venerate as their patron, and whom they report to have been imbued with a certain secret doctrine, namely Gnostic, was already held among the Gnostics in a special kind of worship, with various passages of Scripture such as, "What did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed shaken by the wind. And among those born of women there has not arisen one greater than John the Baptist." They twisted these to their own meaning, so that by the reed they understood John as not yet perfected, and by greater among those born of women they understood one already initiated. Finally, they even proclaimed themselves greater than John. For these things, they say, refer to us so that he who is least among us is greater than John. St. Epiphanius against heresies, Book 1, Heresy 26, Section 6. Or else they refer it to the fiery baptism of the Mithraists, compare Welker and Zoega's treatises. Even the Gnostics, as well as the architects, have taken over that baptism of spiritual wisdom and fire, which we find everywhere depicted in idols and in mixing bowls, and which, purged of the most shameful practices of infamous lust, among the architects is called the baptism of light, the so-called Lichtopha. In this Gnostic baptism, as we have already shown above from many passages of the Fathers, certain barbarous words, either Hebrew or other unknown profane terms, were especially employed, see Epiphanius, 20, and St. Irenaeus, Book 1, Chapter 21, Section 3, in order to inspire greater dread in the initiates. In the same way, all the secret words of the architects are Hebrew, such as Makbenao, Gabon, Boaz, Jakin, Jiblam, Chokma, Hak-Ohel, Jehovah, Elohim, Adonai, Shaddai, Gagas, El Ruach, Urim Tumio. See the instructions for the various degrees in many places. Signet Stern first one, 130, 18. And what Welthusen says about them in Pokich Irim, Stade 1804. Pages 44, 54, 88, 160, 164. Finally, we recognize the same practices and various rites among the Gnostics, the Templars, and the architects. The number 13, which in the election of the master of the temple was sacred, among the Gnostics signified the number of the 12 eons with the first father, and among the architects too is held as sacred, see Signastern I, 190 v, page 105. And in their meetings, a watchman, prayer guardian, armed with a sword, stands guard. Just as in the chapters of the Templars, it was the custom for someone to keep watch. Since the identity of the symbols of the Templars and the architects has been shown plainly, and the rite of each has for the most part been explained, I now judge that the true origin of the architects should be investigated. And since we have never been admitted into these inner sanctuaries, we may speak more freely about their mysteries. Yet, lest the trust of the uninitiated be undermined by what we say, this should be noted. On various occasions, already at the time of the Egyptian expedition, in a lodge inhabited by Frenchmen and left behind by them, then seized by Turks who were ravaging us, and afterwards made public in writings passed down by inheritance, we have thoroughly examined the instructions of the various degrees, so that we can distinguish well enough whether what is found in published books on the mysteries of the architects, La Maçonnerie Adon Hiramite, Signatstern, Sarzena, etc., is true or false. Thus, with no secret betrayed and no silence violated, we may nevertheless speak, not indeed as initiates, yet as those who have learned enough more freely to set forth our opinion and to investigate the source of the architects. Although, beyond doubt, the doctrine of the Templars, after the destruction of the order, purified, merged with that of the architects, as is shown by the identity of the sim, as is evident from the symbols, monuments, and style. Yet I judge the architectural doctrine of the Templars to be more ancient, not derived from that architectural tradition which is said to have existed in England already in the 9th century, see Sarsana, but from the very history of buildings and from the monuments of antiquity. The symbols of architectural doctrine, namely mathematical figures and building instruments, which we find in the paintings of Templar churches and in the sculptures of the Baphometists, are also seen in older buildings, especially Scottish ones, and in Gnostic monuments as on seals and on Abraxas gems, see the plates taken from Macarius and those used by Nicolai in the ornamented frontispiece of his book. But the same things are found already in monuments of a far earlier age, namely Roman ones, see plate 4-9, from whose inscriptions one may infer nothing except that these monuments were set up by architects or by masons. Since astronomy makes the greatest use of geometry and its instruments, and since astrology arose from the abuse of astronomy, it seems very likely to us that astrologers, who in the time of Domitian were called by the Latins mathematicians, as in Suetonius and Juvenal, made use of the same instruments. Therefore, we believe that those geometric figures carved on the tombs of freedmen and freedwomen signify that the person who set up the monument, or the person for whom the monument was set up, had been initiated into the secret doctrine of the mathematicians, which in the last days of the Roman state was spreading at Rome, and as we see from Suetonius, was dangerous to religion. If these conjectures are true, it is easy to refer the mathematicians of the Middle Ages, that is, the architects, to a secret discipline of initiation in mathematics, from which they were later expelled altogether by the mathematicians, see Tacitus, Annals 52, by decree of the Senate, and from which it may be traced back to an Eastern philosophy, Chaldean, Syrian, and Egyptian. Greater credence is due to what we report from Arabic histories about the first institution of architectural art, or of the Solomonic house, for they provide us with a historical testimony not to be despised. This agrees better with an architectural foundation. We believe that house of wisdom, Didor al-Hikmah, which al-Hakim founded at Cairo at the end of the 11th century, was the first architectural lodge, as the histories attest. This house of wisdom, as we learned from Macrizai, was a kind of academy in which for display the precepts of every philosophy and of mathematics were handed down, enriched by royal gifts and by the frequent gathering of students of every kind and sex. Besides this, however, a secret doctrine was also flourishing there, and with it a discipline whose stages were various. Through these the candidate was led, and in the final stage he was taught that one ought to believe nothing and that everything was permitted. The apostles of this sect, unbelievers, were soon spread throughout all Asia, everywhere they gained and adopted followers. Thus, this new impious doctrine, under the name of the Ismailites, acquired the greatest possible notoriety, and with that notoriety, power. Among the number of these apostles was that Hassan Saba, founder of the Assassins, who, as master of this order, made famous by sword and dagger, dwelling in Persia in the fortress of Alamut, ruled at his command 2 chief leaders, one for the eastern region of Khorasan, the other for the western, in the mountains of Syria. The eastern leader, living in the mountains between Tortosa and Antiratum, is very well known in the writers of the Deeds of God. Through the Franks, under the name, the Old Man of the Mountain, he was entangled in various ties with the Templars, both in war and in peace, so that the assassins were first defeated by the Templars, but afterward became their tributaries. That there was also a closer bond or communication between these two orders, the Order of the Dagger, the Assassins, and the Order of the Sword, the Templars, is proved by the fact that the Brothers of the Knighthood of the Temple, always opposing expeditions against Egypt, where the center of Ismailite doctrine was, openly favored the enemy, so that 12 of them, because they had handed over the fortress of Kerak by order of the king of Jerusalem, were hanged with a noose. If, then, some trust is to be placed in that architectural tradition of a secret doctrine established by Walter of Montbéliard and communicated in a cave to certain Eastern sages, we think that by these sages we should understand certain Syrian Gnostics or Ismailites, through whom the foundations of this secret doctrine flowed to the regular canons, and from them to the Brothers of the Knighthood of the Temple. You will find more about that wisdom of the cave, in imitation of which Bacon's Solomonic house seems to have been built, in our History of the Assassins, to which we now refer the reader. Here we have, as far as historical sources allow, sufficiently established the most ancient traces of an architectural doctrine. Now, returning to the doctrine itself, we shall show the intimate connection of the genuine Gnostic and Ophite doctrine of the Templars with the most ancient teachings of Persian cosmology and Syrian mythology. So that it is easy to see that under that ancient Eastern philosophy, so often sought out by more recent writers on the history of philosophy, nothing other than gnosis ought to be understood. The whole doctrine of gnosis, as we have seen, turns chiefly on 2 points, namely cosmogony and Genesis, as what mortals should know it, seems not to have been granted to us to discover how this world came into being, and how it is preserved by an unbroken process of generation. The knowledge of this mystery and of the origin of evil was the first aim of philosophy among all peoples. They tried to reach it by various paths, But after many fruitless and wearisome labors to find true knowledge, they found no other result than that they knew nothing, yet, though their hope was disappointed. In their attempt to draw out the true first principles of all things and to explain the first cause of all phenomena, they came to this, perceiving that nothing is greater than the twofold kind of all nature, male and female. They set this before themselves in the worship of the sun and moon, of the stars and the elements, to which all mythology can be reduced. But when they abandoned what lies under the senses and wished to penetrate more deeply into the mysteries of the spiritual world and the origin of evil, they fell into an abyss of utterly ridiculous fables. The most ancient of these fables are Syrian and Egyptian. Preserved from Sanchoniathon and Manetho, they agree with those accounts which Greek writers have handed down to us about the religion of these peoples. Although we do not doubt that their origin must ultimately be sought in India, still, in this survey of the doctrines of the Gnostics, we shall not go beyond Persia and the Zoroastrian teachings, which are sufficient to show the original identity of this Eastern doctrine. First, we shall briefly examine the cosmogony of the Gnostics and their teaching about the origin of evil in the most ancient mythologies. We shall compare their mysteries with the rites and ceremonies of the most famous mystery cults, and finally we shall show that nearly the same secret doctrine emerges, which runs out into sheer pantheism and even today is widespread in a great part of the East, so that from this knowledge that most true saying of wisdom may be proclaimed. Nothing new is born under the sun. We must therefore begin with cosmogony. The first aeon of the Gnostics is taken from Plato's Aeon, or rather along with it, from one and the same Eastern source, since the very word eon is Persian and signifies nothing other than unbegotten time, a definition you will find in Plato himself. From time there came forth two principles of all things, mind and matter. These already constitute that complete dualism of the Persian books, in which the principle of spirituality, Plato's and the Gnostics, highest good, is called Ormuzd, while the principle of sensible things is called Ahriman, spirit and matter, although both are for the forming of this world when they ought to have come together. But after the world had been formed, they clash in continual opposition and perpetual conflict, and this dualism, which the Gnostics in the long lower series of eons expressed under the names Sophia and Jaldabaoth, runs through the whole world from beginning to end. 68. According to Plato, from the highest good, or the eternal God, there proceeds a creative mind, or demiurge, and from this there comes forth the soul of the world. These make up the first Platonic Trinity. A second, lower trinity in the same author is found to be constituted from the idea, or father, from matter, or mother, and from what is produced, or son, that is, the world. 69. This twofold Platonic Trinity the Gnostics imitated by multiplying the eons, so that in their higher pleroma they place the first Father, the first Son, and the Holy Spirit, or Sophia proceeding from the last. But in the region outside the pleroma they set the mother Achamoth, her son Jaldabaoth, and this visible world as the work of him and of his 6 sons. That the primitive Trinity was represented among the Gnostics cannot be shown from the documents of Persian cosmogony that have come down to us in the books of the Zend. Yet we think it existed among them as well, since it appears among the Indians and among the Egyptians, and indeed in that very famous hieroglyphic figure set above the gates of all the temples, where the globe represents the sun, which Plato too and Hermes Trismegistus proclaim to be the most fitting image of the highest good. Beneath the serpent, however, Nous, or the good demiurge, was at last made, though it is more likely that beneath the wings and the other symbols the spirit, or the intelligent soul of the world, was meant. Moreover, Eusebius, teaching from Sanchoniathon that the world itself was intelligent under a similar figure, is more obscure than can be clearly understood. 70, whoever refuses to grant this higher trinity, corresponding to Plato's higher trinity, will certainly not deny their second trinity, constituted from the father Osiris, the mother Isis, and the son Horus, since we see that it is signified in so many words, in Plato's Timaeus in the doctrine of the soul of the world, and also treated by Plutarch in his work on Isis, where Timaeus calls matter mother, and seal, and we have already seen above where the discussion was of baptism, that this image of the seal corrupted was preserved in Gnostic ceremonies. Since they called the baptizing one Father and Sealer, but the baptized one Son and Sealed, the 6 Gnostic archons, together with the 7th Jaldabaoth, plainly correspond to the 6 Ameshaspans, and to Ormuzd of the Persians, and to the sons of the Demiurge in Plato, as in the Elohim, as we have already noted above. And here also the 8 primitive gods of the Egyptians, we note that the number which everywhere occurs in the Gnostic formula. Inscribed on idols and on bowls, I and the 7 of our stock, appears here as well. In short, this is also the number of the Kabiri, 7, together with an 8th, Asclepius, as Eusebius reports from Sanchoniathon, following Philo. The Phoenicians, in their commentaries, related that the Kabiri of the Phoenicians, like the Amshaspans of the Persians, the sons of God of Plato, and the archons of the Gnostics, helpers of the Demiurge in creating the world, had been present in the creation of the world, and this may be inferred from their symbol, namely the hammer which all the demiurgic gods carry. Besides the 6 archons of the Gnostics, helpers of the Father Jaldabaoth in creating the world and forming man, we also find among the Ophites another son of God, the Nous, that is, mind, twisted into the shape of a serpent, whom they seem to have taken from the Ophianius of Pherecydes and from ancient commentaries on Syrian mythology. For just as Ophianius, leader of the giants with serpent feet, sons of the earth, attempted to wage war against the gods, so the Ophites taught that the Nous, or the son of Jaldabaoth, cast down into the world in serpent form, also begot 6 sons, and they taught that he himself was the 7th, in imitation of the archonic hierarchy, who, as enemies of the human race, opposed that same one because of the punishment inflicted by the Father on account of man. But the origin of Ophionius himself, whose most ancient mention we find in Pherecydes, as cited by Origen, and in Eusebius from Philo, seems rather to be traced back to Egypt, since Philo, following Sanchoniathon, passes from the Egyptian Agathemon, or Neph, according to the tradition of Epes. To mention of Ophionius, according to the tradition of Pherecydes, what Philo then narrates in the passage already cited about the demiurge Neph producing an egg, agrees very well with the commentaries on that most ancient Orphic cosmogony, and with those preserved in Athenagoras, where from water and matter an animal arises in the form of a serpent, with the head of a lion holding the egg of God, from which heaven and earth are formed. These are the most ancient traces in Greek writers of the serpent in cosmogony and in Syrian mythology, traces which can be followed beyond Egypt and even as far as India. Having thus set out the origin of the Gnostic demiurge and his offspring from the most ancient mythologies, we shall now in the same way pursue Sophia, or Meton. We have already shown above that most of what is attributed to Rhea, Cybele, Venus, and Hercules had been heaped together. Again, in Sanchoniathon, we find that almost all the same ornaments are assigned to various gods and goddesses. Thus the name, Achamoth, from Rhea, called Mot or Mut, a threefold person from Cybele, a being both male and female, and a name from Venus, horns from Astarte or from Proserpina, a veil from Isis and Minerva, a triple face, and the dog as well, which is consecrated to those same guides of the way from Hecate, and finally the eyes and ears multiplied, features which we often see carved over the whole body of that same figure, Saturn of the Phoenicians has altered. The stars, namely the sun, the moon, and the star, which are everywhere carved on the breast, back, and arms of our idols, are the chief elements of the Gnostic diagram, and they correspond to that Platonic diagram, the description of which seems to have been before the eyes of the makers of that very famous Ophite diagram, refuted by Origen in his work against Celsus. In the final conclusion, that Achamoth of the Gnostics, from whose sight and tears the elements arose, certainly is none other than nature itself, arising from the infusion of mind into matter, whom the whole East, under the names of Isis, Ceres, Astarte, the Syrian goddess, the good goddess, and so forth, has always celebrated as one and the same, only under various names. that the ceremonies of the Ophite orgies or of the Templars' mysteries, and all these things were derived from the most ancient mysteries. We have already shown above, and here we shall confirm it by citing only a few passages. The raising of the phallus, which the Ophites, in the form of a serpent, suspend in the wood of life, shaped like a phallus, they celebrate in the sculptures of ancient bowls. It was a chief feature of the Dionysiac festival. We find the mystical bowl or vessel in the Eleusinian rites called the Cernos everywhere. They revered the serpent not only in the Bacchanalia, but also in the mysteries of the good goddess with the most holy worship. Purifications used everywhere in the mysteries of the good goddess went under the very name of baptism. And the initiates were called Bara. The ferula and the girdle, too, were sacred to the worship of Bacchus. A phallus and a serpent were carried in the sacred baskets, just as the Ophites kept a serpent in a bowl, and the temples of Baphomet in their chests. The profane were kept away, and in the chapters of the Templars, a knight stood guard to keep out the profaned. Finally, the supper and the Gnostic union, which was the Ophites' Eucharist, were modeled on those which were celebrated in the Dionysiac and Eleusinian rites. In the Dionysiac rites, the distribution of flesh, or division of meats, was nothing other than a supper or mystical Eucharist, and the abduction of Proserpina by Pluto, which the Hierophant celebrated with a priestess, the lights having been extinguished, the cross, i.e. 366, sacred marriage, is nothing other than a prototype of that mystical union which the Valentinians and the Ophites, when their lights were extinguished, celebrated in promiscuous intercourse. Likewise, in the ceremonies of the mystical marriage, in reliefs, the figure of the mixing bowl is shown. Where the marriage bed is represented by a pyre, you can recognize among the attendants the ministers of most ancient mysteries. There you have, Plate 2, Fig 1, on the right, standing nearest the pyre, the Epibomus, who, standing by the pyre or mystical altar, is about to place wood upon it. Another follows, carrying a rod. On the left you see the Deduchus, who carries the torch, the Hydranes, who holds a simple book for the purification of the initiates, the Hecults, sounding the trumpet, and the Spondophorus, who carries a vessel for libations. Finally, on this left side nearest the pyre, either the Stylistes, because he bears a robe, or the Hierophant himself, who in one hand carries a cup shaped like a little flask, called a carafe, and in the other a loaf shaped like a ring. The kindled pyre, according to Tertullian, signified the mystical marriage bed of the universal conflagration, which the Gnostics had adopted from the Stoics, and by which they taught that, at the end of the world, all things would be dissolved. As this doctrine of the universal conflagration agrees with a very ancient Stoic interpretation, which they derive from Chaldea, so too the earliest Gnostic cosmogony about the immersion of spirit into matter through some ignoble passions, and about the formation of the world, can be found preserved in the Phoenician teaching in Eusebius from Sanchoniathon. For just as Sophia, from a burning desire to know the Father, sinks down into matter, so also, in Eusebius, the spirit that proceeds from the abyss, called Bao, seized by love for its own first principles and mingled with them, produces all things. Bao of the Phoenicians corresponds to the Bythos of the Gnostics, from whom, as from Athor of the Egyptians, all the gods, the eons of the Gnostics, were said to have drawn their origin. Here, too, we should note, and it is worth seeing, that Balbo, that comic figure of the Eleusinian mysteries, is derived from this Phoenician Bao, and the fact that even a mind appeared in the mysteries gives the greatest credibility that in those rites there was handed down not only a doctrine of expiations and of the underworld, but also a very ancient cosmogony and genesis. Fire, as everyone agrees, among the Stoics was not only the instrument of the universal burning, but also the beginning and element of all generation. So too, among the Gnostics, as we see from the carvings of idols and from our mixing bowls, where from the same crater, the symbol of the mother, fire blazes forth and brings forth the infant. The material doctrine of the Gnostics remaining here, it rose no higher toward a more exalted light. Having advanced through the allegory of the image of the Supreme Being, it regarded fire alone as the generative power, or as its symbol. The Neoplatonists, following Plato's example, who set forth the most beautiful idea of the Supreme Being under the image of the sun, and keeping to his track and pressing the footsteps of the Eleatics, drew everything toward that higher, immaterial light by which the human mind, illuminated by the divine mind, attains the higher degrees of perfection. The Ophites, however, in no way aiming at moral perfection, thought that the highest summit of all knowledge lay in carnal knowing, and by illumination they understood nothing other than intercourse and promiscuous lust, by which the initiates were held to be illuminated and baptized. This utterly wicked interpretation, by which the Ophians defiled the ancient doctrine of philosophy or of Eastern discipline, certainly is not to be regarded as true and genuine, but as some heresy derived from an earlier teaching. That most ancient discipline, now in some measure polluted among Greeks and Syrians, among semi-barbarians and semi-Christians, and in the East, its true homeland, stained with the foulest filth of sensuality. Despite all these corruptions and despite the intrusion of the Islamic religion, continued to flourish, and even today lives on in the mystical doctrine of the Sufis. Although it is in no way permissible to defend that same doctrine as a pantheism wholly without distinction, nevertheless its luminous purity utterly recoils from the shameful inventions of the Ophians, whose dark orgies celebrated at night were truly, as Tertullian already said, most worthy of darkness and fire, and whose epiphanies and torch-bearings were nothing else than an outpouring of pleasure, by which they believed they could attain that divine moistening of light, that is, of Sophia, of whom we have already spoken above with the fathers. After we have shown that the Ophians and the brothers of the temple, the followers of their militia, in their orgies imitated the most ancient mysteries, and that their whole natural and supernatural philosophy was cobbled together from certain crude commentaries of the most ancient Greek philosophers. It is now time to investigate their cosmogony and their moral, or rather immoral, part of doctrine. From their unbridled license by which they indulged every pleasure, it is right to declare that they were pigs from Epicurus' own herd. Their physical dogmas they drew from Heraclitus, such as the conflagration of the universe, and they twisted the moral saying, "Know thyself," to their own meaning. Yet, in order to defend their secret doctrine and their traditions, they seem to have pretended, among the various dogmas and commentaries of the ancients that were publicly known, to especially those sayings which they twisted into a defense of their own shameful practices, the Socratic "Know thyself," and that earlier Epicurean "Look to God the former," since they understood under knowledge nothing but carnal knowledge. They interpreted as referring to debauchery, teaching that by the moistening of semen, men themselves become gods. What Plotinus always objected to the Gnostics on this point, looked to God as they carried it on their lips, we have already seen above. Here we may add the Templars, as well as having held themselves to be gods like the Gnostics. And for this we can offer no clearer testimony than a passage from Titel, where the fully initiated Templar is called God himself, namely, Temple God. It remains that we mention another expansion, or rather perversion, of that same Delphic saying. The "know thyself" of this doctrine was replaced, in a Panurgian fashion, by "know everything, but know no one," from this principle truly Machiavellian. All their politics took its beginning, as they even tried to support it with that gospel precept, "Be prudent as serpents." Under the name of charity, they added the most wicked prudence, and with it a license, so that to attain everything and to permit everything seemed to them the highest goal of wisdom. But the end of this moral doctrine, or rather immoral doctrine, of the Gnostic Ophian sect is in truth the same as that which in the final stage of the Assassins or Ishmaelites' teaching we saw set before their true disciples in these words: "Nothing is to be believed, and everything is permitted." How this end of the Gnostic Ophian teaching drove its followers headlong into outstanding crimes, and compelled them to plunge into every lust and to mingle with a foul herd of defiled slaves, is plain enough. Certainly nothing great or good was ever to be expected from adherents of this doctrine, unless men endowed with a higher political genius, having made the same doctrine subject to their ambition, used it as an instrument for attaining the highest end of ambition, Such men, already by nature destined to be masters, sought the highest aim of their labors, not in the satiety of pleasures, but higher, in the exercise of power. In the end, they embraced this doctrine because by indulging every lust and every iniquity, it made them readier for every crime and bound them together as accomplices. The whole history of East and West supplies us not only with examples, but with striking examples of this truth in the orders of the Assassins and the Templars. Each of them, fortified by a secret doctrine, strove in almost the same way to gain dominion over the world. They differed only in this, that the Assassins ranged widely against their enemies with the dagger like Sicarii, whereas the Templars used only the sword against foes. Moreover, each order wore a white garment and insignia marked with red, a cross among the Templars, a belt among the Assassins. It agrees in a remarkable way with very many institutions, especially in this, that they would openly practice the revealed religion which their secret doctrine wholly undermined, with the utmost strictness and defend it most fiercely until having found a suitable opportunity. They thought the time had come to exist in the open, when Gnosis would sit upon the throne, the lion having been sacrificed, and the dragon, or the world, trampled underfoot, and when it would hold all spiritual and temporal power. The Templars, then, thinking that political virtues alone, courage and prudence, and the virtue of charity, that is, bound by the bond of pederasty, were everything, hung all other things upon a slender thread. They held that these alone were the virtues that opened the way to rule and were to be cultivated. Their symbols, the sword and the dog, are found everywhere on tombs and monuments. But the secret symbols of Metis, that is, of Sophia in the Gnostic sense, the serpent and the letter T, were seen only in inner sanctuaries unless they were displayed openly, or shown to the eyes of the uninitiated by certain known hieroglyphs, or else used in such a way that the profane would think them mere architectural ornament. Thus, in the church of Berchtoldsdorf, on the right side of the choir, and in the church of the Templars at Aziae Catina in Sicily, the T is very often carved into the pavement. This idea of metis, that is, of prudence asabia and of charity pederastia, they express symbolically in various ways, both in reliefs and idols and in pictures and coins, as we shall soon see. Now portraying a male and female idol, now only a Baphometic head, now a serpent-shaped sphinx, now some other monster that ends foully in a fish. Wherever you find such figures in buildings of the Middle Ages, you may be sure that the architects of that time had been initiated into Gnostic doctrine. And in all the churches once possessed by the Templars, you will find such symbols, unless devouring time has already destroyed them. Everywhere, then, the dragon swallowing an infant, as in the relief on a bowl, plate 2, figure 4. In the reliefs of the church of Schöngrabern, plate 3, fig 2, and in the church of St. Egidius, plate 4, fig 20, or the dragon fighting with a horseman, or the lion bridled by a man trampled and slain, plate 2, fig 3. Or the Baphometic head itself, stroking and mocking the serpents, plate 4, fig 18. Or serpents carried in a man's hands, as in the church at Poitiers, plate 4, fig 15. These symbols indicate the Gnostic doctrine of the architects. This Gnostic doctrine, shared by the most ancient architects and by the Templars, though erased by the passage of time after the abolition of the Templar order, seems to have been preserved only in the inner sanctuaries of certain secret architectural societies. Chapter 7. On the coins and tokens of the Templars, here opening up a new field hitherto unknown to all numismatists, we have arranged for a set of 100 pieces to be struck in copper. See plate 5. Of these, 82 are unpublished. The remaining 18 were indeed known, but not understood. Almost all are thin silver bracteates, and only a very few are solid pieces. These, like the bracteates, seem to have served not as money, but as tokens by which the brothers might recognize one another. We have already mentioned that in the ruins of a Templar castle near the village of Neunkirchen in the district of Celle in Styria, likewise in the debris of a Templar building by the church of Waltersdorf in Austria and in Hungary. From the ruins of a certain monastery which tradition assigns to the order of the Brothers of the Red Cross, bracteate coins of exactly the same kind were dug up, among which to lessen the confusion of the types. We here present in copper, chiefly those that display different figures. Silver bracteate coins from the Gadala collection. The first 36, as in many other cases, were found in the castle of Ravensburg and had been melted down by the local dean for use as tableware for banquets. Had not that excellent man, the illustrious knight Gadala, rescued them from the common ruin of all those Templar monuments under that dean. For when the dean had pulled down the paintings, the chapter house tower, whose 12 stone seats were set into the wall, with a 13th for the preceptor or master, and had demolished everything, and had turned the meeting place into a dairy, and from the coins he found had at once cast cups or forks, then by a happy stroke of good learning, the aforesaid knight, adorned with every kind of philosophical study, and most generous in sharing his rare collections, came upon the scene and saved 50 bracteate coins from that destruction, all unknown, all with figures until now inexplicable. Yet, from what has been said, easily clarified and distinguished, in short, all Templar pieces, showing their characteristic symbols. Of these, 14 are so worn by use or age that their figures are either doubtful or wholly impossible to disentangle, but the remaining 36, excellently preserved, we here submit to the faithful eyes in the first 3 series of our plate, see plate 5. The first series contains coins marked with dragons of various kinds, an eagle, or as we shall show a little further on, rather a phoenix, a cross, and a sword. Emblems symbols commonly associated with the Templars. Of these, the first 6 are marked with dragons. Some have a bird's head, others a dog's, others a cat's, and therefore they are not to be taken as against the hostile dragon who was the ruler of the world. And it was attacking the Templar under the guise of St. George, but rather I would judge that it is to be taken as a friendly dragon or serpent, a household serpent, as it were, of the Ophians. Since even on the seals of the Gnostics called Abraxas, the serpent is sometimes fashioned with a lion's head, sometimes with a dog's. See plate 4, figs 1, 2, 3. 4, 98. The next 3 coins represent 3 eagles, or perhaps phoenixes, that sit upon a bough, probably the rainbow being represented, just as on several well-known bracteate coins from Zealand, an eagle sitting on a bough is seen. We shall speak further about this bird, whether it is an eagle or a phoenix, in another place in connection with the following bracteate coins, where the inscription, Volo Iwoi, I fly in the morning red, is found. 99. The last 2 coins of this series bear a cross as their device, but distinguished by other attributes in each case. In the 10th coin, you see a sword set upright between 2 dragon heads. In the 11th, a cross rising from a head. And in the 12th, a cross placed between 2 letters M as to the first. It is already known to us that the Ophians and the Templars understood under the cross the wood of life, or that Baphometic character which, in the sense of gnosis, ought to trample down the dragon, that is, the ruler of this world. The cross, which is the sign of life, rising from a dog's head in the 11th coin, alludes to the well-known veneration of the dog. Finally, the cross placed between 2 letters, M, indicates the doubled initial letter of Metis. The second series contains 12 coins, all marked with cups. The first 6, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. The 19th and 20th are guarded by 2 upright serpents, such as you very often see carved on the mystic Dionysian vessels. Such are also seen on vessels commonly called Etruscan, which most likely in those mystic ceremonies represented nothing other than the things of the underworld, and accompanied the initiates to the tomb. The 20th and 21st, of which the former is furnished with handles, are seen uncovered in such a way that a space lies between the lid and the bowl itself, and the 2 letters R and L can be read. These then are those mystic bowls, 3 of which adorned with carvings we have already explained above, and which there, as here in the type on the coin, are covered with lids. These are the same cups which, distinguished by lilies, crosses, and the same figure of the Pythagorean pentagon that appears on the lid of our bowl, see plate 2, fig 5, are seen in the tombs at Melitene of the troop of knights of St. Louis returning from the crusading expedition. And these we here present to the eye, according to the information communicated to us by the most illustrious and most reverend Bishop of Zealand, the most learned Dr. Munter, 100. What the letters RL mean, and to make a conjecture about their hidden sense, will not be out of place here. In them, we think there is nothing else than parts of that very famous word Graal, as we have already judged above from the arguments we brought forward about the identity of the Grail and the temple crater. On the base of the two-headed vessel of Baphomet, the letter G is likewise engraved, and its meaning, with the Arabic word added, remains unambiguous. It is gnosis. With this initial G already assumed as known, here only the third letter of the word Graal is lacking, namely which is expressed by the inverted shape of a cup with a transverse line, so that from these two conspicuous letters, RL, there is almost no doubt left for us that the word Graal is to be understood. In the same way, too, on the idol of Baphomet, see Plate 1, Fig 11, we see that of the word Metis, only the two letters are expressed. And the remaining two are indicated by asterisks, so that the whole word could easily be completed by an initiated reader, while it escaped the profane, something that was altogether necessary for concealing the mystery of iniquity. Since what has been said is easily confirmed by the appearance of the monuments set before our eyes, let us now try to draw out the true sense of the mystical word Graal. SG set opposite the crater, see Plate 2, Fig 9, indicates gnosis. And although one may suppose that the three remaining letters are merely the initials of certain mystical words which, joined together, present this word Graal as a token of Gnostic confession, still, since nothing certain can be established about the meaning of the remaining three, and since so many empty and erroneous interpretations have been published up to now, we shall suggest some more probable ones here, which better agree with the mystical sense of Gnostic doctrine. Thus, Graal could mean Gnosis rules, it frees souls, or Gnosis, queen of the liberal arts, or Gnosis restores the soul's labor. Or finally, what is perhaps truly most similar and most in keeping with Gnostic doctrine, Gnosis brings back the fallen soul, or Gnosis reintegrates the weary soul. Even if all these miss the mark, we still think it certain that the word Graal signified something similar. The last three numbers, 22, 23, 24 of this series, display three cups. In two of them there are three lilies, and in the last three heads are placed between them. We find nowhere that lilies had a special meaning among the Gnostics and Templars, but the lily occurs everywhere in Templar monuments and sculptures, especially at the ends of scepters, and therefore perhaps has no other meaning than that of a scepter or dominion. Thus, you very often see a lily scepter in the reliefs of the church at Skuengraben and on the thin bracteate coins of the Templars that follow. The same is also seen on tombs in the city of Melitink. Therefore, whatever meaning it may carry, it is clear that it was some kind of temple symbol. The three heads set among three lilies should be compared with those three Gnostic heads hanging on a tree, which you have depicted in Abraxas Plate 4 Fig 5, and with those in the reliefs of the church at Skuengraben, where Jaldabaoth draws a trident from a certain amphora. By these we pass most fittingly to the series of the next 12 coins. The first two of the third series, 25, 26, have a head joined to a bowl, which certainly is nothing other than Baphomet, whom we see portrayed in all the following pieces for the most part grim and terrifying, so that it agrees with the report of that Templar, Raoul de Gizzi, who said he had seen it in 7 heads, terrible, and like a demon. Coin 27 and 28 of the same type shows the letters F and R, which we believe were placed in the position of the chalice, as its name Graal, since F is not to be taken as an F, but like a digamma, that is, a double G. In coins 29 and 30, Metis has the form of a sphinx, which not only accords very well with that deposition which says this idol had 4 feet, but also indicates the transferred meaning of Metis, namely, that in this idol they soon represented the same thing as Sophia, that is wisdom, and soon Metis, that is prudence. It is no wonder that this idol or head was represented in so many different ways, since, as many as there were heads of initiates, so too there seem to have been differing opinions about the figure of Baphomet. Coin 31 shows an equally terrifying figure of Baphomet, who here, stretching out his arms, seems to be seeking someone to embrace. Coin 32, if it were found elsewhere, might be thought to show the image of a jester. But found together with these bracteate tokens, which are all Templar, It certainly represents nothing else than a Baphometic head wrapped in its hood, or, if you prefer, one of the Templars who worshipped it after removing their hoods. In coin 33, in place of the hood, the head is marked with a crown, indeed with the insignia of a Persian tiara, and in the following coin, 34, this crown has been made into the form of the crown of a Roman emperor. The letters F and R written beside it show that this head is of the same kind as the Baphomet seen above, in whose place of the chalice the initial letter of the same name, G, was set. In coin 35, a star is added to the head of Metis, and in idols and in bowls it everywhere seems joined with it. The head is inscribed with the star, which corresponds most exactly to the bronze star, plate 2, fig 16. From the numismatic collection of Moxie, a most distinguished Hungarian gentleman chiefly intent on collecting notable coins, and appointed by the Pope to the office of dispatching letters, Alexius Moxie, has communicated to us several thin bracteate coins and saluti, of which only 24, because of the similarity of their designs, are described here, together with the place where they were found in the ruins of the monastery of the Veras Baratok, or Red Friars. I have examined and reviewed them here, and you will find them engraved in the 4th and 5th series, from No 37 up to 58. You can easily distinguish the saluti from the bracteates. The former are struck on both sides, the latter on one side only. You will also see there under No 37 a solidus on which, on one side, a bust or some monument appears. It is not sufficiently clear here what it is, though it is made clearer below, and the letter G is inscribed an initial, as it seems, of the name, Noskos. On the reverse, an animal seems to represent a dragon, which a man or some beast wearing a hood is looking at, since you will find this hood already on the sphinges in Nos. 29 and 30, you will observe that the hood always signifies a monk. Not those monks, however, who have monks and beasts as synonyms, as the author of the Monachology has it. The solidus, nope. 38 shows on its face a temple tower standing between two lilies, and on the reverse a digamama, that is a double G, inscribed on a crown. In coin number 39, on one side there is a Baphomet-like head. On the other, again, that sepulchral monument or tomb is to be seen, which was already visible in No 37 and which still occurs frequently. In the next 8 bracteates, Baphomet-like heads, Nos 41, 42. A dragon, 40, star, and a moon, 43. Eagles, 40, 44, and that monster, 45, which we already mentioned at number 31, and which here seems to carry a club in its hands, are shown. An armed Templar, 47, is also seen, and a dragon or lion holding a sword, 48. The Solidus, nope, 49, together with 37 and 38, on which it is based, has this G in common, and it must be compared with 45 and 31. Certainly this figure cannot be called either a king, because of the wings, or an angel, because of the serpent-shaped club in the crown, and therefore it must be taken as some other monster not yet explained here, namely as Baphomet. What the animals expressed on the reverse of this coin, and on several that follow, signify is not hard to say, since besides dragons, lions, and eagles, explained in the Gnostic commentaries, deer, panthers, and a unicorn are here depicted. Yet from the same source nothing is clear to us. In Nos 51 and 52 a chalice is carried by those beasts. Only numismatists are permitted to interpret this chalice as a shield of arms, just as they also interpret the Sphinx hood as a monk's cowl. On the reverse of coin 52, in the 3rd section, that cenotaph appears again, which we have already observed under Nos 37 and 39. Coin 53 shows a dog with the inscription Tote, and on the reverse it displays 6 lilies arranged in the same way as the 6 serpents are seen twisted together in the Abraxas, see Macarius. Coins 56 and 57 bear a crown turreted head like that of Metis, see plate 2, figs 1 and 5, a lily-bearing scepter in one hand and a cross in the other, clearly indicating the order of the Templars through the cross that dominates. Coins found in the ruins of the Templars' monastery at Waltersdorf. From half a century's worth of bracteate coins found there, which the noble Count Ferdinand of Colorado most generously shared with us, we have taken care to have only 6 engraved here in copper. since the rest are for the most part either worn away or else are the same as those found in the ruins of the Templars' castle in Syria and of their monastery in Hungary. This agreement wonderfully confirms our interpretation. These 6 coins, being especially noteworthy, display marks of the Templars. Besides the Baphometic head clothed in a hood on number 59, you see there the Ophitic Metis, number 62, with a turreted crown and holding 2 snakes, like that figure in the reliefs of the church at Poitiers and like several idols in the collections of the King of France and of Schoenfeld. 2 serpents accompany the chalice in number 63. And in number 64, a serpent attacks the chalice. The letter B speaks of Baphomet, and another hieroglyphic mark, or something like it, most likely signifies that mystical character of Baphomet. The name of Metis herself, whose head we have already seen expressed in various figures, also occurs on coin 36, where H and T are at the side. Above, however, in the region of the lily, an inverted M is seen below, so that with the repeated letter H, it should be read MH, the same name, which occurs on this single one of these silver bracteates, may now be seen more often below, from the Bretfeld coin cabinet. On coins 65 and 66, you see, in part, 2 keys set crosswise, which make an M and a T. 2 H are formed by the beard of the keys. So that the name MH may come forth, this key has for that reason been more suitably employed as a graphic sign, since the Baphometic character of the cloak is also called the key of Gnosis, on coin number 10. 67, only a single key in the form of a handled cross, depicts the 2 letters T and H, so that here the last 2 letters of the word meet to be read on the idol, plate 1 fig 11, remain, while the other 2 must be understood. On coin number 68, Medi is contracted into Latin letters so that the 3rd stroke of the letter M at the same time makes the letter E to be read twice, while the cross makes the letter T in the same way. The character of coin number 74 is to be explained where Medi is read if you look not at the upright figure, but at the horizontal one on the side where it is joined to the image of the crown, for the M occupies the whole width of the coin, and the 2 outermost strokes of that same line are at the same time shaped into an E. In the same way, coin No 75 is to be explained. It indicates the Baphometic crown of 30 common to this and the preceding coin. Coin No 72 shows a type the same on both sides, namely a cross in circles, on which the letter B, that is the initial letter of Baphomet, is inscribed. I certainly would not dare to explain the characters of coin 71. This CA joined with a cross seems to be nothing other than the first syllable of the word caritas, which in the Templar inscription we have already seen joined with Medi coin. No 73 bears the arms of the Templars. 75 and 76 display their secret symbols, namely a serpent and a dog, on the reverse side of the cross, from the Gotwick coin cabinet, in the most celebrated convent of Gotwick, whose very ancient reputation in the Republic of Letters is sustained by the learning of its present-day monks and by the distinguished abbot, once professor of hermeneutics, the most learned Reverend Aurigler, and by the librarian Fredericus Camerarius. A treasury of bracteate coins is preserved, such as in Europe either is unique or has no equal. Most of the coins published by Seelander, having been sold by that same abbot in his time, are here seen in their original form. From this most ample treasury, the next 6 were most generously communicated to us by the Reverend Abbot, and we make public their individual hieroglyphic inscriptions and show that they were, as we have said, temple Gnostic tokens. In coin 77, 78, and 79, you have that monument or tomb, which we have already examined under analysis 37, 39, and 52, and which here puts forth palm branches. On one of these 2 monuments, a cross is inscribed. On the other, a double gamma, that the tree rising from the tomb, distinguished by the inscription Gnosis, is nothing other than the tree of life or of knowledge is beyond doubt. But as for the tomb, we do not dare to assert anything certain about it. Yet we think it is the same as the bust in which, among the architects, the master Hiram was slain and buried, and from which a palm branch sprang forth later. In subsequent times, changed into a branch of acacia, We cannot affirm that these and similar coins were used as tokens of the Templars, but they are certainly rather architectonic, and in the end they are symbols of the final goal of that same doctrine, namely of Gnosis. Finally, so that no doubt may remain for you about similar pieces, compare coins 77 and 79 with the Gnostic seal, plate 4 fig 6, taken from Macarius, where such a tree blossoms from a human bust or trunk. The next coin, number 80, shows a temple building whose ground plan may be seen in the temple coin in fair as St. Vincent. There you will find, under the title, Objects Found Under the Foundations of a House of Templars near Inquinion, 2 coins, on one of which the plan of a building with 4 towers is visible, something that most likely represented that Templar building constructed after the model of the Temple of Jerusalem. 80, you have this whole Jerusalem temple with 4 upright towers. The inscription, very well preserved, contains the following letters which, if read from the left, yield no sense at all. ASS Simonative Q. But if reading from right to left, and beginning from the first mark of separation placed between 2 S's, the letters follow in this order. Stack venumus, and indeed this too would yield no sense, unless the mystery lay in the letter M set obliquely, and therefore to be read as K or as Greek S, something already revealed by the Gnostic inscriptions of the Abraxas stones, where the word schnoozy for schnumus or chnuus is read, as the Gnostic hieroglyph indicates. Once this is understood, the meaning of this inscription is easily disclosed, namely, S sta, that is, most holy, Kuvinoes or Quinuesis, that is, Gnosis, whose name, hitherto snatched from the eyes of the profane, was intelligible only to the initiated. Coin 81 represents an eagle or perhaps a phoenix, to which in clear letters is assigned volo io, that is, I fly toward the dawn, but the legend to be read around the edge is truly enigmatic, containing the following letters to be read from left to right. Rho, then op and H in contracted form, and again clearly vio. The next letter, N, has the shape of a reclining Z, and this stands in place of another. Here it must be read as A. The rest is NBVK, which with B and V transposed we judge should be read thus, Ro Ofrio Anubikai. Ro, an Arabic or Hebrew word, signifies spirit, which among the Gnostics was the same as wisdom, and was also represented by a dove, so that this bird, which in the same way that we said it was an eagle or a phoenix, it may perhaps represent a dove. Next comes the name of the serpent spirits, Genius, Ophius, or Ophianius, which so often appears in inscriptions on Gnostic seals called Abrasax, perhaps here, joined with Rho. This name is to be understood as meaning serpent spirit, since in Gnostic sculptures and temples we have very often seen a dog joined with a serpent, so that most frequently a serpent is depicted with a dog's head. Therefore here too Ophius, that is, the genius of the serpent, is joined with the name Anubis, or the genius of the dog, and Abraxas is often inscribed as well. That these two were named as household guardian spirits of the Gnostics and of the Templars on a Bractite Templar coin is nothing surprising. But far more remarkable is the inscription of the following coin, number 82, where, besides Meton, that already recognized name of the Ophians, and Isis and Eartha, 2 ancient divinities of the Egyptians and the Germans, there appear after them 5 transposed letters that form the name Graal for Graal. For it is read most clearly, Mede Isid Earth Glar. What the V between Earth and Graal means I do not know, unless it has been put there for the German conjunction on meaning and. From this inscription, it is clear that the Templars mixed Gnostic and Ophitic symbols and the myths of other ancient religions, and fashioned and embellished an impious doctrine in various ways, according to their own supposed science and their own pleasure. From the Schoenfeld Museum, coin number 83 of all the bracteates of this kind that we know is by far the most noteworthy, because besides the star and the letter M, the initial letter of Metis, stamped in the design, and below it the initial letter of Gnosis engraved with a stylus, it is the strongest evidence that these coins served as tokens, so that they could carry this abbreviated meton in place of idols, which they kept in their borders or in their chests and could carry everywhere with them. Bracteate coin, 84, displays the figure of Metis, very distinct. On her head, a three-pointed crown, like that Metis on our chalices. In one hand, a cross, in the other, a lily-bearing scepter, and especially with clearly expressed breasts, which in similar coins struck from other bronze pieces are usually neglected. To indicate the worship in which this coin was held as a kind of religious symbol, the whole coin was encircled with a crown of very precious stones and kept under crystal, so that it presents the appearance of a host in a radiant crown being shown to the people. Coins taken from the plates of Mater's dissertation. Mater's work contains no fewer than 40 Bracteate coins of the Templars. With the figure of Metis clearly shown, everywhere a head, hideous and foul, distinguished by a crown with 30 towers, and everywhere it bears in its hands a cross and a banner, or a scepter, or two trees, the tree of life and of knowledge, and a star. Here we have had only 4 of them engraved in bronze, those which display some distinctive Baphometic character or inscription. Of these, coin 85 holds in its hand a monstrous animal, made up of an infant and a dog, and crowned with an erect groin, certainly nothing else than the dog of Pederasty, the guide. And here it is coupled with the infant, whom Metis in our idols holds in his arm. Compare this coin the numbers 31, 45, and 50 of this plate. Coin 86 represents Metis holding 2 trees in his hands, namely the tree of life and of knowledge. We already recognize this image as Gnostic in that ancient monument of the Church of Milan. See plate 3, fig 4. To remove every doubt, the name of Metis is also written in the margin here in the initial letters ME, as in our idol, plate 1, fig 11, where the third letter T seems to have been missing in a place somewhat worn away. The same name Metis, in Greek letters, is to be read on coin 36 as MHT, where the M is seen inverted in the form of a W, while H must be read twice. We have already seen in Abraxas and other Bracteate coins that in these secret inscriptions the letter M was chiefly inverted, and that the whole key of this mystery consisted in transposed or altered letters. By such inversion and transposition, even the inscription of coin 87, which Mater reads as Heracus, by the grace of God, Margrave of the east of Misnia, yields something quite different. For first, the letter which he thinks is D is N, and the M, which in Abraxas is to be read as S, must here too be pronounced as S, and thus from the transposed letters Geo shown, the word gnosis is to be read. Finally, coin 88 shows the same letters H and T with M placed in the middle, which we have already so often found on the Bretfeld coins, and which can be read in no other way than MHT, with the H repeated twice. From Seelander's writings on German coins of the Middle Ages, Seelander published all of Mater's Bracteate coins, which are all surely Templar and Baphometic, and about which he could not even guess what they meant. Such are those 24 in the plate on page 17, published, of which the discussion has already been above, and which he says are all Ascanian Brandenburg coins. In this woman, sword-bearing and crowned, he sees nothing else than an advocate of the Caesars, which is plainly absurd. Others, more plausibly, said that this woman on other coins, where she sits on the same serpent throne with a knight standing by with a naked sword, is an abbess to whom the patron of her own convent was in attendance. But all the inscriptions, tending to the same meaning, and now already explained, as they proceed, give assurance that these coins are Templar coins, and that Metin, or a personification of the wisdom of the Templar, is represented, whom the knight with the drawn sword attends as defender and guardian of the temple. From these we shall examine here 12 especially noteworthy pieces struck in bronze. Coin 89. A cross with a blessing hand is so formed that the hand covers the upper part of the cross, and in this way only the letter T appears, the tree of life and of knowledge. The inscription, very clearly to be read, Metis is 1 of 14, needs no explanation since it contains nothing other than a display before the eyes of the Baphometic character. Seelander's explanation is absurd. He interpreted these words as an invocation of the Savior. Mater has corrected him, though not very successfully, since he judged that this inscription should be read as Metensi, you will see the same Metin seated on the throne, and on the other side, 2 veiled Baphometic heads with a cross and a blessing hand on coin 90. Coin 91 shows Metin with a cross and a lily-bearing scepter with veiled head. A Templar with a drawn sword stands ready for service. The inscription to be read from right to left is CS Acu Vinavmis. Here only the C must be placed after the S, and the M is to be read as the Greek, so that it reads Sacra Kenosis, that is Gnosis, the same inscription, but now completely worn away, is to be read on the 92nd coin, where on one side the whole temple of Jerusalem is shown, and on the other side 2 of its towers with 2 crosses, with a blessing hand, and the head of Met's visible. The same inscription occurs on the following coins, together with the legend of Otto of Marcian, which least of all argues against our interpretation, since it shows only that he had been initiated into the secret Templar, or Gnostic, doctrine. Thus, on coin 94, one reads, Ar Auresiac Venovom, for Aes. That is Sacro Sancta Quinusis, or Gnosis. Likewise on coin 95, St. T presented through the cross, Acfinio, for Aes, that is Gnosis. Coin 93 presents the same inscription on both sides, but somewhat varied on one side where a bishop or a Templar with a crozier between 2 towers, with a blessing hand and a star is to be read from right to left. Sta, the cross, represents the letter T, Kuvanam, for Io, that is Holy Quinosis, or on the other side the same word is omitted, and only the syllable Aki remains, which is to be read after the cross. Holy Nazim is or Gnosis on coin 96, where an eagle or a phoenix sits within an arch between 2 towers. There is the same inscription, RSSD. Sacred Holy, or perhaps rather Queen Most Holy, Kovinam for ease, contracted in the form of a crescent sigma. That is Kawinosis for Gnosis on coin 97 of the same type and inscription, and on coin 98. Sacred Kenosis, or Gnosis, coin 98, shows the same figures as the preceding one, but the inscription, already repeated so many times, is formed differently, namely, Stekfener, where here it seems to be wrongly shaped for E. S, in the form of a crescent sigma, R, again for ET, which is entirely superfluous. And S, that is Most Holy Quiniosis, that is again Gnosis, but far more noteworthy, the inscription of the inner circle, to be read from right to left. Ekol, with L in the Greek lambda form, Eol, which certainly is nothing other than that famous Hakalel, or divine truth, whose name is preserved among the architectonic brethren, Sipokich Irim. Pages 44 and 244. Yet this Hebrew word introduced here is all the less surprising, since as we know from the Fathers, the Ophites intersperse various Hebrew words into their teaching. And on another Gnostic coin, we shall already find the Hebrew word ro, that is spirit, the bird, whether it is an eagle, a phoenix, or a dove, representing this spirit is seen on coin 99, treading, as it were, on a lion placed beneath its feet. The inscription is the same as on the preceding coins, but much more distorted. Sakfeo, wrongly, for N. Ivan, in male form for at. That is Most Holy Coeliosis, that is. Again Gnosis, coin 100, a Templar set between 2 towers, with the inscription Otto, the name of the Templar, or Ophite, prince. This coin, which occurs twice in Sealander, is purely Gnostic. You see here the little temple set between a lily-bearing scepter and a branch, which Mita holds in her hands on other coins, placed between 2 towers, and a saw and 2 broken crosses, which here, in numismatics, are read as Otto, quite plausibly also as symbols of the phallus and the chalice, or of the narrow way, since they occur very frequently. Finally, a certain sealed letter is added, by which we may suppose that the secret doctrine and hidden institutions of certain people are meant to be signified.